Hello, everybody out there in internet land, all you budding little interns and fellows that want to get into the medical industry by dissecting a debate. Welcome to Debate Dissection. My name is Mark Reed, and I'm joined once again by my lovely co-host Ember. Hey, Ems.
Hello.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Today, I selected this debate because I find Trent Horn kind of funny. I did include a bit at the start, like not because it has any debate value, but because it kind of is a little bit funny. I think the last time that O'Connor debated Trent Horn was back when he was really young, and it's just hilarious. So, yeah, good old Trent. Yeah, good old Trent. I find him to be like a Labrador, earnest but ineffective, I guess. He doesn't convince me. I'll put it that way, and I don't see him convincing many people of the validity of his arguments. But he seems very earnest, which it's something, I guess. I did flick through this one. It's more casual than anything else. Definitely more casual. Now, I'm going to post in the chat, and I almost forgot the fundraising for Miranda because I keep forgetting. So I'm gonna do that quickly. But how have you been, Ems? How are you doing?
Oh, ups and downs. Went to
Yeah.
another Pride Fest today, hence the dress and,
Yay!
and my buttons and things. Um, the I don't know. The weather was weird. It was both hot and cold at the same time. It was like way too warm, but also chilly. And I don't know how
Well,
that
the
works. It
wind,
just was.
wind factor,
A,
like chill factor from the wind,
a
or
bit, I guess. I don't know.
yeah.
It was the whole thing, but I survived. So there's
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, that is a thing. That is definitely a thing. We get some of that, like especially if you're on the coast. Like if you're out of the wind, it's blazing hot, and then you go into the wind, and the wind is freezing, and it's just the sun that's hot. So that's not that
Yeah.
unusual to me, I
It's
guess.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Like that you in order to get the true temperature, you have to take the temperature of the air in the shade where it's not getting radiance directly, but
Right.
it's also not getting wind chill, because you can have
Yeah.
we need another factor. We all understand wind chill. It lowers the perceived temperature. But
Hmm.
there's also like the sun does more than warm the air. It also directly conveys energy, and so there's like an effect like wind chill, but in the other direction from the sunlight rather than from the wind.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
We need
Interesting.
better meteorology. It's too many
Yeah.
meteors, probably. Yeah,
Too many meteors?
in
Okay, I
our
don't.
meteorology.
I don't think meteorology really
Don't mind
covers
me. I had to take a
meteors.
lot of painkillers to get through today.
Nah, that's fine. That's fine. Hey, that's fine. That's fine. Um, yeah, I gotta say, G2G, I'm a big fan of O'Connor. I think he does really well. A bit lately, he's been a bit fuzzy lately. Sort of this is the universe conscious kind of thing. I get, but I have to remind myself that he is a professional philosopher. Like entertaining some wacky stuff is all par for the course. Like I don't like we've got to remind ourselves that these guys they're really yeah, I totally get it. I'm fine with it. I just really like his debate style. Trent Doherty. Oh, okay. I've
I blame the
never heard of
mustache.
Trent Doherty. Never heard of it. I'll check him out, Kip. Thank you. Because
It's
I
familiar.
wanna fundamentalist fails. If that's a worse Trent, I'm on it. Look, he's not that bad. He's not that bad. But I will grab the debate up, and we can get started. But yeah, if you have given to Miranda, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's worrying. It's worrying what the people in the US go through when their system doesn't support them. It's definitely worrying. If you haven't, I completely understand. It's hard times. If you can, please do. She is a lovely human being. I've met her on a few occasions in chats and things like that, and definitely a wonderful human being. But thank you so much, everybody. Now, this is the moderator. He doesn't do a lot. He's just introducing them. But something was so funny at the start, I had to include it. I would have cut this off, but I had to include it. So it's basically him asking questions. And it's very casual. It's more like a discussion, which I prefer a structured debate. I think a structured debate is more... there is more confrontation of people's ideas in a structured debate. I think, when you have sort of a introduction and then rebuttal, I think you can really challenge those ideas a lot better than you can just having a discussion kind of thing. But I would rather a discussion over a dumpster fire. I will tell you that right now. So yeah, I'm there for it. I'm there for it. Are you ready to get started? Is there anything else I've forgotten? Hey, just before we start, if you do want to do me a favor, do hit the like and subscribe and things like that. Would really help me out. If not, that's cool too. Just enjoy, please. Anything I've missed, Ems?
This appears to be on Premier Unbelievable, Justin Brierly's network, but Justin isn't hosting.
Right.
I don't know who the new fellow is, so that's
I don't
interesting.
know. I don't know. Maybe he's on holiday. I don't know. He's not. I mean, he's not a bad moderator, but I think one of the things I did, because I skimmed through this, one of the things I sort of did notice is that the moderator really isn't needed, which is great. That's fantastic. It really speaks volumes about a person's reasonableness and civilness if the moderator isn't really needed. That it's good for them to be there, but if you can have just a discussion with people, that's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Alex, I know you've debated Trent a couple of times before, and I think you once described him as your most formidable debating partner. Are you ready for round 2 or 3?
I can't wait. I did, in part because Trent was one of my early debates. I mean, back in probably 2019 or 2020 or something, we had an online debate, and I remember thinking, gosh, these things sometimes take a bit more preparation than you might have thought. But the thing I like most about Trent, I think, is he seems like just a decent bloke who's interested in having good conversations. So I'm kind of looking forward to this, yeah.
Well,
just throwing shade at Trent. Well, I did think he was my most formidable opponent, but not anymore. Like, no, look, I'm really putting words in his mouth, but yeah, like, I remember my first series of debates, and it was such a big deal, right? Like, it was like, so at the time when I started to get into debate, it was kind of like, well, I'm going to do things that challenge myself, right? So I still remember that I was absolutely petrified going in, right? Like, it wasn't like, oh, well, I'm going to be fantastic. No, I was kind of petrified. So, but I was doing things that challenged myself, and to a certain degree, I still do. But yeah, it's just you come out and you go, wow, that's a lot harder than your Matt Delahunty or Alex O'Connor or any of these guys makes it seem. They make it seem effortless, right? And you go in there, and it is actually it's a lot of work up front if you do need to prep. It's a lot of it's a lot more mental stress and mental load than you expected it to be. It is not the, it's very rewarding, but it's not the, easy thing that these guys make it seem like. I apologize if I make it seem easy. It really is not. Really is not.
7 hours.
That was hell, man. Like, that was my girl. That was horrible. Look, it wasn't like, okay, so that was horrible, but not so much because it was debating. It was more, I was worried about all of the stuff being said that was just awful, right? Like, and my debates are a reflection of my channel, and you've got some guy saying the most, like, if you don't know what Ember's referring to, I did a 7-hour debate against Andrew Wilson. I don't know. I know why I did it. Just upon reflection, I shouldn't have, because I was doing it more as a favor to James, who I thought was my friend. But on reflection, that was not the case. I think I was being pretty much used. And look, I got something out of it. I'm not going to say, hey, I got nothing out of it. But I think that, it was him setting up one of those sort of right-wing dumpster fires that, you can't get a word in edgewise and you're not treated very well kind of thing. I think it was just a setup. But I think that what concerning me about that one was that he was saying the most out of pocket, disgusting crap, and I did not want that on my channel, nor should it be anywhere upon YouTube, anywhere on YouTube. And I think that that's what that man does to basically win debates, right? He makes other people quit by saying the most reprehensible crap. They don't want it on their channel. They don't want to have to deal with it. I mean, I had to edit that debate to take out all of the racism and things that were against YouTube terms of service. That was a lot of work. That was a lot of work to go through 7 hours of footage and take out all of the racist crap that Andrew Wilson put in that debate, right? That's a lot of work. And I think he knows that. That's why he wasn't broadcasting on YouTube. He was broadcasting on an external platform. So he doesn't give a shit if he syncs the YouTube thing with a whole load of stuff that's against YouTube policy. He doesn't care. So, and my other concern was I was basically being absolutely invaded by his minions. And he claims that oh, he didn't send them over there. Anyone going over there will be banned from his channel, kind of thing. I know that's a lie because the person leading them was literally his wife.
Yeah, it was so fun. As he was saying that, Rachel Wilson was in Mark's chat harassing people. I'm like, oh, you're gonna ban her? I will though. I banned her, and that's my favorite part of that whole story is I got to ban Rachel Wilson.
But Andrew, he's saying up front, oh, anybody, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But he's got his own thing. And what I noticed is that a lot of the time he flipped from talking to the YouTube channel, talking to in James's, to muting himself on that one and talking to his own audience. So I think it's very well understood by his chat that even though he says not to do that, they will do it. And, in saying, oh, I try to restrain them. No, you're not. Your wife's in there, dude. Like, what are you talking about? And either number one, your wife understands the game that you're playing and will go over to harass other content creators. So she understands as well as your audience understands that you don't really mean it. Or number two, you can't control your wife. And from everything I've heard from Andrew Wilson, that would be, he is an epitome of, hey, my wife is subservient to me. I am big, all hail man. I find that hard to believe. So, yeah, that was definitely a mistake. I was pretty well, I was suckered into that. I even agreed not to debate Andrew Wilson or Jim Bob or any of these other people from the Crucible before I go on to James's channel, because he wanted me to first debate them on his channel. At the same time, he did such a lousy job of moderation and did not respect my time. I honestly look back and go, why was I actually doing this guy favors? Because if I think someone is my friend, I will go out of my way to help them. That's just the kind of person I am. And, I would rather be suckered in. I would rather be suckered in by someone who's not my friend than have a person who is my friend need me and I'm not there for them. Right? Like, this is the thing. I would rather be maybe naive and taken advantage of occasionally if I get to help my friends. That's just, look, sue me. All right, I'm really trying to justify my participation in that. And I guess I really want to say, I'm sorry, I can't justify my participation in that particular debate. And, I want to give, number one, it was like it was really upsetting having to go through and edit that thing to take all of the bullshit out. It was upsetting because I actually was going to hire an editor to do that for me, but it wasn't getting done in a timely fashion. So, but you know, no, that's
It's hard to find, like, a good editor who both like understands YouTube TOS and the request you have in mind, and has like editor ability. Like, I mean, sometimes all you need is a few things cut out, or maybe a few clips from other videos cut in, or whatever the case may be. But like for YouTube editing, you know, you want the close-ups, and you want the transitions, and finding people who have all three of those skills together is so hard.
Yeah, yeah. And like I going into like when Peter first tricked me into starting a YouTube channel. Yes, Peter tricked me. I think that I did not know all of the weird skills that I would need to do a YouTube channel, like thumbnails and things. Like, you know, it's just it's weird. It's strange. It's very strange. Anyway, so that tangent's in the chat. Thank you for staying with me through that. Yeah, that was absolute horse hockey, that entire thing, and I regret even entertaining those people. I do notice though, people like Jim Bob and Wilson, and they don't even acknowledge my presence in chat. They basically, like, Jim Bob, he runs away. Like, I'll comment on stuff in chats and he'll be there and he'll just like dip. It's really weird. I don't know. Very strange.
Oh, it's so good to have you both on. Unbelievable. Trent, maybe we can just dive right in with the argument. Before the show began, we were discussing how your approach might differ from some other apologetic approaches to the resurrection. Can you just outline, how would you make your historical case for the resurrection?
Okay, so this is about the resurrection of Jesus specifically. So, like, the moderator, he's very casual, does a good job of, you know, just sort of getting straight into it. So, yeah, the affirmative should go first. I get you. Even though this is a conversation, he's definitely gone, well, let's introduce Alex and then go straight to Trent Horn for the affirmative, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I like it. Like, let's hear what we're talking about today.
Right.
Resurrection of Jesus.
Sure. And once again, I really want to thank Alex for being here. It's a joy to get to speak with him again. We had one formal debate before on Pints with Aquinas, and then we had kind of an informal back and forth with Capturing Christianity a few years ago. So it's been a little while. Mm-hmm. I appreciate the description, most formidable opponent. I worry always when the bar is set so high. One finds in these situations it's good to set the bar extremely low when it comes to expectations. But if I can just be a good bloke or a decent chap, that is something I aim to do. When I speak to people, I do get concerned, and when you see people trying to put forward, I think, Alex, I'd love for your thoughts on this, maybe on a future episode, something for you to talk about. When it comes to putting forward a defense of the Christian faith, I've noticed a little bit of a shift in the past 10, 15 years in how Christians go about that. And a lot of Christians now become much more aggressive and very, not even just forthright, but aggressive, even profane.
And that ties in well to what I was talking about, right? This is Trent Horn, a Christian, basically saying, hey, Christians are getting this ridiculous amount of aggressiveness. So I would 100% agree with Trent Horn on this. You know, my examples are Andrew Wilson that we're just talking about. I mean, the guy is aggressive, like he said, profane. Yeah, incredibly racist. He's a fascist. He doesn't believe in democracy. It's just this you know, to say that they are encapsulating the worst aspects of human beings is an understatement. You know, like, they are absolutely terrible. Like, they're just terrible.
On purpose, even. Like,
yes.
At least with Wilson, and to some extent Jim Bob types, there's an intent to be as bad as they can be.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a flow on, because don't forget that they sort of, especially Jim Bob, he follows a presup sort of thing. So that was the original idea of presuppositionalists. They were just as big as assholes as possible, so to stop the argument, stop the conversation, stop people talking. Because they couldn't deal with the arguments, the idea was you just be obnoxious as possible to stop the conversation. I mean, it hasn't worked. The churches are still bleeding members as ever, but that's their intention. It's like presup isn't to give an argument for their faith. It's to frustrate the atheists, basically. It's to frustrate people who have arguments against you by saying, hey, your argument is invalid because I claim rights to argumentation. Which is basically what they do. They say, hey, all intelligibility comes from God. Now, you can't use intelligibility without proving my worldview right. That is literally part of their argument.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or I just point out intelligibility comes from yo mama. So by trying to argue anything, you just prove I'm correct.
Yeah, yeah. Because your mama. Yeah, it is just as bad as that. Yes. You know.
A no holds bar, like taking the worst of the new atheist internet stuff and putting forward. And then they're also kind of light on the substance. And I don't like that. I think we should follow the
trend. These profane Christians are basically taking the worst of the new atheist stuff and building on that. Excuse me, sir. There are some problems with the new atheists. Now the old new atheists, but never mind that. But it's not like Andrew Wilson stole Dawkins' crib notes, you know? No, just because you don't like one group of people doesn't mean an even worse group of people is that way because of the other group of people.
Right. Well, I think that he's sort of mistaken, and I think that there is something to that deep down, though. There is like, for instance, when Matt Delahunty sort of yells at a caller kind of thing, right? Like when a caller calls in and says some, really out-of-pocket stuff that doesn't make any sense and is evasive, there is that level of, well, if you're not going to give me the respect to, for instance, answer the question, or try some absolute horse hockey to try and get around what we're talking about, or not acknowledge what I've said, like, he would get a bit angry at them. I would admit that. I have mentioned it before. I understand why, right? But that is very different than Matt Delahunty in an actual debate, right? Where somebody is keeping to the subject, is not trying to be evasive. There's nothing, he doesn't lose their temper at them. It's with people calling in saying, you're borrowing from my worldview kind of thing. And it's like, what, dude, what are we borrowing? Like, what are you talking about? Like, people were doing logic and stuff before Christianity existed. Get out of here, man. Like, seriously. Like, it is this sort of, when he's saying the worst, I think he's sort of saying the worst in any scenario, not just in debates. But they've taken it one step further to, even if somebody is being really good faith and, just sort of approaching a debate, the people he's talking about, like, they go in with the intentionality to sink the entire conversation, right? I don't think that some of the new atheists, even the ones that are known for losing their temper at people, go in there with that intention, right? Matt Delahunty doesn't go in there with the intention to lose his temper. It's just some of the weird stuff is he does, but I don't think he goes in with that intention. These guys are going in with the intention to completely reduce the entire discussion to a dumpster fire.
Well, couple of points. The first is that while Matt has a reputation, like his show is called The Hang Up because of the whole no, 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 no,
Right.
no, you're done thing. And
Yep.
people kind of like to see that. It's a little bit cathartic. That's one of the things that made him so well known. But the main thing that made him so well known is that he matches tone and energy, and he's had very productive conversations. It's not like he
Yes. Yeah.
always goes off on people. It's something of
Right. Right.
the exception rather than the typical. It's especially when people like these profane Christians go in there with the intent to piss him off, like his debate with Andrew Wilson. That was the goal, was to
Yes.
piss
Yeah.
him off.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's not that it's his new atheism that's causing the anger. It's his response to the bad faith bullshit coming out of Christianity. But also, that isn't necessarily related. Both of them can be descended from trends we've been observing in our general culture that's been moving more towards antagonism and a total lack of empathy or a deliberate effort to not understand where another person is coming from. This doesn't have to even be a Christian or an atheist thing.
Right.
So to me, this looks like Trent is just trying to get an extra dig in at atheism. Like, even though the Christians are behaving badly, this is atheism's fault, actually.
Yeah, we can't, like, I guess I should clarify. I don't think that the Christians' behavior, with Thinger is resting upon new atheism. I don't think that is the cause for it. I don't know when new atheism, as opposed to, because really the people that you see do this kind of thing is usually the presuppositionalists, right? Like, it usually is them. So I think that presup, it predates the new atheist movement.
Probably. I forget when Plantinga wrote his book, but his book wasn't even the first.
No, it was Van Til, wasn't it? Hang on a second. I'm just looking it up now. Yeah, so Cornelius Van Til, 1895 to 1987. So, we're talking about, like, the new atheists started with, Daniel Dennett and, Dan Barker and all of these. But Presup and their sort of really aggressive tactics predates that by a lot. It really does. So I do push back on that. I have considered before, does that influence how Christians are responding to us? And it may, but I really want to stress that I don't think I have seen a debate where Matt Delahunty's been that aggressive kind of thing. And we do get angry atheists. Like, that is definitely a thing. That's a stereotype for a reason, and I think that stereotype exists because a lot of people that deconvert have a lot of anger towards the institutions that they feel lied to them for ages and took their money and, convinced them of something that they have no evidence for. It's really this case of, well, there's a reason for that. And I think that anger is in a way justified. It is sort of a natural response. Anger is a part of the grieving process. And I really want to stress that somebody leaving a religion has to go through a grieving process. Anger is part of it. But if you're talking about debating, those people aren't usually going in for debates and things. I'm incredibly lucky because I never had that, I was never part of a Christian or any other religion to have to go through that kind of, separation from friends, family, be ostracized, be told by people, have a fear of being cast into hell for simply not being able to convince myself that this is real. It's really a bit horrible, to be honest with you. Like, and I really do feel for everybody going through it. But that doesn't mean that you get to, attack these people.
facts and the evidence, let it speak, and we don't have to be over exaggerated or especially not profane in how we engage it. So when it comes to the evidence of the resurrection,
I will give Trent credit for acknowledging that some Christians are being utterly horrible out there, and I think, I don't know, he doesn't make clear exactly who he's talking about, but I think he is talking about the Orthodox bros and all of these guys that are really just being obnoxious pieces of crap. Like, let's face it, they're being obnoxious pieces of crap they think that the way to win a debate is to say the most reprehensible, shocking things possible, and when the other person leaves because A, they can't put up with it, B, they don't want their audience to be exposed to it, and, C, it's just not what they've signed up for in a debate. I think they think they win. If they can be so obnoxious that someone doesn't want to talk to them, then that they win by default. And that's not how discussion and debate works.
Right. Like, Wilson has said himself on his Crucible thing that to him, if he can make the other person crash out, that to him is a win. He doesn't care about any of the intellectual stuff. It's just triggering the libs.
I didn't know that, but that makes sense. Like, he just, he thinks that if he can make somebody leave, then that's a win. That doesn't make you win the argument. Like, how does that follow? You say stuff that the other person doesn't want to listen to, therefore you are correct. How does that follow?
What kind of fallacy would that be? Like, I don't think it's one of the categorized ones, but it'd be something like,
I think it's just a non sequitur.
And drove my opponent away, therefore I'm correct.
Yeah, it's just a non sequitur. It just does not follow that you are correct. Like that. I could be an absolute, a complete absolute nonce in there. I could be an absolute idiot in there and insult your mother and stuff. It doesn't mean that I'm correct on the age of the earth or something. Like, how does that follow? It just baffles me.
I've noticed, like, in the past 10 years, I've studied a lot between, two groups that often debate this. You'll have skeptics on one side, like Alex, or previously debates, like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens. And then you have a lot of evangelical apologists, people like William Lane Craig and Mike Licona. And one thing I've noticed that they both kind of have in common is they're very skeptical towards non-Protestant supernatural things. So, for example, I've watched in debates where William Lane Craig or Mike Licona or others are, will talk about, how do you explain these groups of individuals, groups of disciples claim to see the risen Jesus? I mean, group hallucinations are almost unheard of. And so, like, a lot of my case will be similar to theirs, saying we have really good historical evidence. When it comes to showing the resurrection, it's basically showing three facts. Jesus was alive.
Yeah, I don't think group hallucinations, like when he says they're incredibly rare, I think I would say violations of the natural laws are probably even rarer. Right? Like, so if that's going to be your argument that it's rare to have group hallucinations or group delusions, right? Like, because group delusions are actually a bit more common than hallucinations. Mm-hmm. Hallucinations being you saw something that you didn't, right? Group delusions are you believe something that didn't actually, doesn't actually exist in reality. I know there's a bit of a fine line in between that, but like, for instance, a group delusion may be a bunch of people that think that the government is out to get them, think sovereign citizens or something, right? It's not that they're seeing things, but they believe something they probably, that is not true, right? A group delusion, that they believe something with absolutely no evidence and they should not. A group hallucination is they actually see something, visually or auditorily or something like that, right? Like that is a bit different.
It's the difference between a person claiming to be abducted by aliens and a person claiming they're convinced there's aliens and the government is hiding it.
Exactly. So, but group hallucinations still do happen, where people claim to see something, they all agree, and they've shared this sort of hallucination. I mean, there's some wild cases in the past, like, for instance, the dancing disease that went across
Yeah.
Germany at some point, like all of these people just feeling like they have to dance. And we think it wasn't anything like an actual disease. It was a group delusion. It was basically this sort of a psychological thing where they felt like they had to, and that got transmitted from person to person. Like really wild stuff. So
It is. It gives us the grounding for other ideas of social contagion today, because it seems like
Yep.
there's so many things that once you become aware of the possibility of a thing, whether it's what we used to call Munchausen's or something else, but a certain
Right.
percentage of people will, I don't know, intrusive thoughts, ego dystonic concepts just get in there, and they're like, well, now it's going to happen to you, and you're like, no, that's silly, but it happens to you anyway against your will.
Right.
We learned a lot about psychology from that kind of thing.
And so, yeah, I would agree that group hallucinations are rare, but group delusions still a thing. And the laws of nature being violated. How rare is that? We've never seen an instance of it. Ever.
Then he was dead. Then he was alive again. So whatever the evidence that would show he was alive in the first place should be good enough.
I don't think those are facts. I think that, hey, we can sort of go out there and say, hey, it's a fact that Jesus was a person. I'm not a mythicist. I kind of go with the consensus of historians that say that Jesus was at least a person that roamed around a bit. Okay, fine. I don't think it's the important point for this story. I don't think it matters whether Jesus was a person. It matters whether he actually rose. But he's sort of lumped in with the facts that Jesus rose from the dead. Is that a fact? I don't think that's a fact, my guy. He was dead, died, and then he was alive again. I don't think that's a fact.
I don't think even Habermas contends that one. Like Habermas draws conclusions that lead in that direction, but he's like, well, it's a fact that people said there was an empty tomb. Sure, but does that mean there was an empty tomb? And also, even if there was an empty tomb, does that mean a man came back from the dead? Like, it's not shown by that thing,
Yeah. Could you check your Discord just quickly? I'll just send you something. Not turned out to be a gross slavery apologist in my day. Yeah, that's incredibly disturbing. Even even things like William Lane Craig sort of saying, hey, it was a great blessing that all these children were killed is very disturbing. I don't like it's very strange. I think that they are in this place of holding two conflicting ideas. That it's horrible that people were subject to that kind of stuff, and it was done by a good God that it was all okay. I find it kind of odd, because I would trust that these people, like William Lane Craig or Trent Horn, if they actually saw that in reality and people suffering, that they wouldn't be okay with it. Right? They would not be okay with that happening. But, looking at America at the moment, maybe they would. I don't know. But yeah, I can imagine how that would be upsetting. I get you, Kip. I get you. Yeah, Kip, if you want to join us, that would be awesome. I think that if we're talking about the resurrection, I'm sure Kip would love to discuss it. But hey, no pressure at all, mate. No pressure at all. I'm not trying to force you on anywhere. But if you do want to come up, because I know that Kip's one of those people with a vested interest in the Bible. I don't know if you know this.
I've noticed that about him.
Yeah. just a little bit.
To show he's alive in the second place, and that is people seeing that he's alive, and especially groups of people seeing this, as recorded in 1 Corinthians. I also think we have good historical evidence.
Well, so recorded accounts of people seeing he's alive would be people writing that they saw him alive. 1 Corinthians is not that. 1 Corinthians is Paul saying he talked to people who said he was alive afterwards. And the details are very, very vague on that. He's just 500 people saw that he was alive. right? So I think that he's sort of not, he's sort of saying, hey, we have evidence that 500 people saw him. Well, no, we have a claim by Paul that 500 people saw him. And we don't know who it was, right? It's not like he's gone, hey, here's a list of people that saw him alive. I find this sort of, I think Trent should be aware of this, that we don't have evidence that 500 people saw him. We have evidence that Paul claims 500 people saw him. Which isn't nothing, but it's a lot different context than saying, hey, we have 500 witnesses.
Right. Like even if we have no testimony from those witnesses, we don't even have a statement like we all saw Jesus. We, the undersigned, saw Jesus and a bunch of signatures. It's just Paul say so. And also worth noting, Luke reports a different number on, as I understand it, the same trip.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For Luke's account of these group appearances that Luke, as the atheist Richard Carrier says, is a better than average historian, which is a lot from a very critical atheist like Richard. So what will happen in these situations? I've seen Bart Ehrman, I've seen other.
Yeah, and I have, like Luke's definitely, I've seen that Luke is acknowledged by people as the more intellectual one, that he's sort of often said to be. But we don't know that Luke wrote that story. Right, like just because you go, well, Luke was supposed to be a scribe or a learned man, basically, and this story looks like it was written by a learned man. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same guy. He's not the only scribe in all of Jerusalem. Like, I mean, come on now. It's sort of we still don't know that was Luke. May have been, may not have been.
It's also weird that like part of the thing involves, oh, the Gospels are written by eyewitnesses, when Luke opens specifically with, so I talked to some eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't one.
and if you're talking about Corinthians, Paul is not an eyewitness, right? Like Paul is not an eyewitness to the resurrection. Even if you acknowledge he saw an image of Christ on the road to Damascus, he's still not a party to the resurrection. Like he wasn't there.
Say, well, why don't you believe in these, groups of people say that they saw the Virgin Mary at Fatima or the Virgin Mary at Zaytun, Egypt. And we even have photographs of this apparition that has appeared, that hundreds of thousands of people saw this illuminated figure at Zaytun. Travis Doomsday did a whole academic book that recently on the Zaytun apparition, and he finds it inexplicable. Dale Allison, who I know you spoke with recently.
I've heard Fatima. I'm kind of really unimpressed by the miracle at Fatima because it is. I've never heard of Zaytun. It's something that I suppose I should look into. Are you aware of that one?
No, it doesn't ring a bell anyway. Maybe I've heard of the thing and I just don't know it by that name.
A series of apparitions that began in 1968, 3 years.
So ghosties?
Huh?
So they had ghosties?
Apparently so. The luminous full figure form of the Virgin Mary appeared over the domes of the St. Mary Coptic Orthodox Church in Zaytun. Dove-shaved light. Okay. Miraculous hearings. When was this? So yeah, between 1968 and intermittently for about 3 years in Cairo. Okay, never heard about this. Never heard about this.
Now, if they had a moment with like a church where they were supposedly seeing virgins and whatnot, and like a bunch of amputees showed up and were like, hey, maybe we can get healed. And on a day when there was an apparition, they actually did get healed. Well, then we might have something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, contentions have always been raised the absence of any videography or recorded 16mm footage of the event, which is fair enough. They suggest that President Nasser co-opted the phenomenon to deflect from civil unrest. Yeah, well, that would do it, wouldn't it?
Mm,
Yeah, I don't know about this one. I haven't really looked into it, but I don't think it's inexplicable. I think, yeah, maybe weird, but probably not inexplicable. People like here's the thing: people can be very, very suggestible, right? Like people are open to suggestion when somebody says they see this, and we do it all the time. Like for instance, if you are watching, and I've covered this in my fundamentalist fails section, where somebody is saying, "Hey, the lyrics of this song played backwards say this," and then they put the thing on the screen, you will automatically start to hear it, right? Whereas if you don't pay attention, you don't get suggested to what it says, people will get all kinds of different things that the song played backward will have. Same thing when we're viewing things, right? Like you'll see a rock and someone will go, "Hey, that rock looks like an elephant," and you're like, "Oh, now I see it." Yeah,
on Mars, even.
even yes,
The
yes.
elephant rock on Mars. But it also happens at a lower percentage, but it does still happen when it isn't just noises, but like a person says words, in fact, says a whole sentence, and someone will say, "Does it sound like that person said this?" And then people will hear that, even though
Yeah.
what was actually said is different, you know?
Yes. Yeah, well, that's the basis for all those misheard lyrics things, where people like, they will
Be my
basically say,
magic coffee grind.
right. Like they will do a song with misheard lyrics, like, and it'll usually be hilarious because they'll just be so off the cuff kind of thing. As we reminded people yesterday, the empty tomb is not one of Habermas's minimal facts. He claims it never was. I thought the empty tomb was one of Habermas's minimal facts. I thought that was. I could be wrong, but I thought it
The number
was.
has changed over the years.
Yeah.
And it also
Yeah.
could be that was Lacona, because Lacona
Oh, yeah,
steals
maybe.
Habermas's facts because they're good
Yes.
buddies. So he uses
Yep.
Habermas's fact, but he doesn't always use the same fact Habermas does.
Yeah.
Alex,
Yes.
he finds it just inexplicable because even the Egyptian authorities shut off the electricity to the area, and yet this illuminated figure that looks a lot like the Virgin Mary still appeared. So
Yeah, because generators don't exist.
It looks like a maple leaf.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, did they shut off power to the area? I don't know if they did. Like I said, I haven't really looked into this. But even if they did shut off power to the area, generators and gasoline exists. Okay, like it doesn't. Just because you shut off power to an area doesn't mean that people are incapable of producing illumination.
Right? We've been doing it for many thousands of years before there was electricity. I mean,
Yeah.
hell, magic lanterns, that old projection technology is from fucking candles days, you know?
Yeah, and but like modern day, you can easily like have a gasoline run generator. That's very easy to do. It's not the smoking gun that you think it is, Trent.
for me, I take more middle ground saying, yeah, I think that was a supernatural event. And also I think these other events like Fatima or Zaytun, for me, they lend evidence to Jesus' resurrection, because if Jesus did rise from the dead, these appearances of his mother would not be unexpected. I'd expect a son to take care of his mom, take her up to heaven, and she might go talk to the faithful. But if Jesus did not rise from the dead,
like
I don't know.
That doesn't make any sense. And also, if we want to be consistent, then to give credence to these appearances means we also have to give credences to the appearance of the ghost of the Prophet Muhammad, or the resurrection of Sai Baba, reincarnation.
Yes.
You know, like all of these kinds of claims have to stay on the same ground, you know? So if Mary, it looks like it could be a virgin, how did you check the ghost hymen, Trent? Like, how do you know she's a virgin? But never mind.
Wow. Well,
But,
firstly,
like,
wow.
give them all equal claim, you know?
I'm sorry. We are not checking the genitalia of apparitions to make sure they are who they claim they are. Okay, that's
Right.
not.
First, we have to see if they have feet.
Maybe, yeah. But I totally agree with you. I do agree with you. It's just look, they haven't checked them at all, really, and since the age of, you know, smartphones with cameras, these apparitions have suddenly upped and vanished. It seems to be, as technology to investigate has gotten better, the incidents have gone way down. So do we know this was in fact an apparition? Well, I don't think we do. Like, you're saying you've got a picture, but as people have pointed out, they had, you know, 68, they had video equipment around at the time and nobody took a video of it at all. I mean, come on. Only a very easily, you know, modified photograph kind of thing. Number two is, it's not just the Virgin. If you want to apply this with, hey, it looks like this, you have to apply it to everything, like aliens, Bigfoot, fairies, you know, all this kind of different stuff. Because there's a number of people that have said that they've seen fairies. And I think also with Catholics, the reason why they sort of, the Virgin Mary's so big is because they think that, and I only learnt this pretty recently, that there's a lot of Catholics out there that think that Jesus would have destroyed the world, but Mary keeps jumping in to stop him. Like, like every time they make a prediction of, hey, the Armageddon will happen by this time, and it doesn't, they say, well, Mary jumped in and helped and basically pled for our you know, continued existence kind of thing. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'm sure Mary is a great gal, but can she really, like, stop the Armageddon? It's wild. It's just wild.
That raises an interesting possibility. So I keep going through Bible lore books and so forth. I just finished Dan McClellan's The Bible Says So. And in any case, one of the things that keeps coming up in some, I don't think Dan says it, but I've seen it in a few others, that Eve is the insertion of every other culture's mother goddess.
Yes,
like,
so the Gaia,
even in Christianity, she's called the mother of all who live, you know? It's
Yes.
just, they think of it as human. So it's the same general concept. I wonder if Mary is an iteration of Eve in the new fanfic. And so Jesus isn't the last Adam, he's the last Abel, because he also is a blood sacrifice.
Right. So yes, so if it's Abel, Abel's mother was Eve, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Just a
That
random
makes
thing
sense.
that popped into my head. We can
Yeah.
explore
Well, I
that
mean,
another time.
you know, I think it's an understatement to say that humans recycle stories. It is something that we do. There's a reason why in so many stories you have the man of 1,000 faces or the hero's journey as so often in these stories, and it follows this set thing. We do this again and again and again. The one of the perfect stories for the Man of 1,000 Faces is Star Wars. It follows those beats exactly. You know, young person confused, has a problem with authority, finds a tutor who's old, wise, and experienced. You know, and it follows these beats exactly. So I think that sort of recycling the idea of the mother goddess that sacrifices her progeny for the good of all is probably one of these stories that has been told throughout time. Ninjesta for $2 says, wait, is Eve allowed to take the insertive role? Do I want to know what the insertive role is? I'm kind of...
Well, I mean, apparently Jesus was a big fan of pegging.
Wow. Look, I'm not saying Mary doesn't use a strap-on. I just don't have that Mary uses a strap-on in... that may explain why she's considered a virgin. That
Yeah,
may
would
be
do it,
why.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, are we saying that Mary wasn't in fact knocked up by God, but rather Joseph got pegged? Is that what we're saying here?
It's not impossible, and that is a possible way to get. There are people who have never had sex and use artificial insemination, right? So, like, if
Mhm.
she pegs Joseph, collects the sample in like, I don't know, a clay bowl or whatever the hell they used at the time, and then like finds a way to get it in there, she could, or not necessarily Joseph, anybody, honestly, it could be Pontius Pilate, but like, yeah, you absolutely could conceive without ever having known a lover.
Well, you don't even have to like use penetration kind of thing. Like if that gets on the area, the chances are small, but there is still a chance that you
Oh,
can
for
become
sure.
pregnant.
It doesn't even need to be on the area. Dr. Ben shared with me a little while back a case study about a woman who got pregnant orally.
Really?
It involved some additional details. She got
Is
stabbed
that
in the
the...
stomach,
Yes,
and
yeah, I heard of that
yeah.
one, yeah. Yeah. That is
But like
wild.
oral pregnancy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was wild. That was in Mexico or something. Just absolutely unbelievable. Yeah, wild. Absolutely wild.
These sorts of apparitions and appearances would be very unexpected. So I'm open more so that there's many strange and odd things that happen. Some of them can be explained naturally, but many I don't think can. So I think that we should follow evidence.
Okay. All right. Let's... Oh, God. All right, Trent. Just because, like, we have natural explanations for some of them, sure. It's not that we can't explain them naturally for the others. We just don't have enough evidence to say we know what caused them. So he's basically trying... I guess Trent's trying to say, hey, if we don't have a natural explanation, then it must be supernatural. It must be somehow divine or some kind... That's not the case. If we don't have an explanation, we don't just default to supernatural. We say we don't have an explanation. Right? Like, this is the thing. Because what he's essentially doing is like a god of the gaps. Like, if we can't explain it, it must be God. Right? And that's not how we should look at things. We should say, well, we don't know the explanation. We need evidence for what it is, including if that is a god. We need an explanation for that. Right? We need evidence to show that it was a god. Otherwise, it's not... we don't default to natural and we don't default to supernatural. We just don't know.
Yeah, this is how you get Zeus's lightning bolt. We don't know where the
Right.
lightning comes from, so it must be Zeus.
Must
Because
be, yeah.
humans, not all humans, obviously, some humans are curious and want to find out new things, but it isn't just this idea of, I can never say I don't know. There has to be a reason, even if it's magic. A bad explanation to these sorts is better than no explanation. And that's an error position, but it's even worse than that, in that there's this hubris, this arrogance, this audacity, if you will, that some people get in their heads, that where we are right now, because it's the most advanced humans have ever been, we effectively know everything. It's along the same lines as humans are the peak of evolution. No, we're still evolving.
Yes.
It's just we're as far as we've gotten so far because this is where we are in time, sort of thing. And so they think if we don't have an explanation right now, there never will be an explanation because we know everything.
Well, I think that I'm not 100% sure that we think we know everything. I think as time goes on, we realize sort of how little we know, kind of thing. like how very little we know. I think as we discover more, we realize that there is so much to know that we're just scratching the surface. So I think that most scientists would say we know very, very little. But in doing so, the mistake is to go, we know very, very little. We're still, grappling with quantum mechanics, and we're still grappling with, origins of the universe and things like that. Therefore, it must be this explanation. That's the problem, right? And it's not that scientists are doing that. Scientists aren't saying, oh, we don't know what caused it, therefore it must be natural. It's just that the only tools that science has to investigate the world is the natural. It's methodological naturalism. So in some way, we will use methodological naturalism until the theists come up with some way we can reliably investigate the supernatural. And it's not our problem that they don't have this methodology. That it does just amount to, well, this is what my religion believes. I have faith, or I believe it because it says to be true. I don't. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a Hume kind of situation. Like, we're not saying it's impossible that it's supernatural. We're saying that it never has been. When we do find an answer, it's never fucking magic. It never has been. And so while it could well be that it might be magic one of these days, you're going to have to show it first, because we're not going to assume it,
Right. And the problem isn't that you don't have methodologies, right? Like, because even saying, well, I have faith in this is a methodology, right? It's basically that you have been raised in a religion, you believe that religion, instead of having any kind of empirical evidence or testing and verification process, you instead say, well, I have faith in it because that's what's required. That is a methodology, but it's not reliable, because everybody doing that comes up with a different answer, right? Like, you don't get in science people over in China or something going, no, we've got a completely different set of physics than you do, right? That doesn't happen, right? Like, it just doesn't happen. You don't have people saying, hey, in computer science, we don't do things in that way. It doesn't work. When we put this architecture into practice, we get something completely different. No, everybody agrees on it. Like, everybody agrees on it. That's why the sciences have this baseline for how it works. Even though some people don't want to acknowledge that. I'm looking at you, Kennedy.
See, we shouldn't necessarily rush to supernatural explanations, but we should see which explanation best accounts for everything without cramming the evidence, without bringing in outside ad hoc explanations. And I think Jesus rising from the dead really does do a good job of explaining a lot of the data surrounding Jesus.
Wait, what do you consider outside ad hoc explanations? Like, because I think God is kind of an ad hoc. Like, it's kind of well, I can't explain this. I get you that you're saying, hey, people saw this apparition, but how do you know it's your religion and not, like, for instance, a oni from Japanese mythology, a spirit, from Japanese mythology, like, you're still bringing in your religion to this event.
Yeah. How do you know it's not Aisha trying to, show you that Muhammad's words are true, or whatever? It's very silly. But also, I don't like that whatever can explain is therefore more probable. Like, no, because magical fairies did it can explain everything, The ability to explain, you have to show that it did do the thing, not that it could do the thing.
Yeah, and hey, show that. That's fine. But like, in the way that you show it, it's got to be reliable. So I think that there is a few things that we do need from the theistic methodologies that would be convincing and be a good way to go about it. So when we talk about evidence and what makes it good evidence, it's got to be reliable, like it keeps producing the same results. So sort of saying, hey, faith healing works, and then it not working a lot of the time, and you just say, well, occasionally, in this one situation it happened. Well, that's not really reliable. It's got to be rigorous. Rigor is sort of taking all possibilities into account, not just one possibility, right? Like, so rigorous is basically eliminating other possibilities, like having controls, for instance. That's why they, in medicine testing, they have a placebo, a control group, to make sure it is not just in people's heads. And it's got to be repeatable as well. And everybody's got to get the same result, right? That's what science is really good at. Everyone gets the same result. Because if somebody does a replication study and comes up with a different result, they'll challenge it, right? And that's what the process is for. They're supposed to challenge it.
Yeah, because we want to make sure, because we can't establish a cause and effect relationship on anything when there's confounding factors. In drug trials, we found a thing that we thought worked in a certain way. It was actually a completely different thing that was having the effect we thought we were testing for.
Yep, absolutely.
Resurrection, but also these other supernatural events throughout history that are connected to the Christian faith. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Alex, I was recently hosting your tour across the UK, an evening with Alex O'Connor, and so many people wanted to find out about what you thought about apparitions. I don't know if that's something you've looked into a lot, or what do you make of this kind of additional case for the resurrection?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because a lot of the time when arguing with a Protestant, you can say something like, well, then how do you explain the Marian apparitions? And with a Catholic, that doesn't quite fly. I suppose I have a general suspicion of these kinds of religious events. And that's not to say that they didn't happen, but to say that insofar as concerns.
Yeah, and so if you don't know, Protestants generally do not believe in the Marian apparitions, right? They'll say, hey, it is sort of a delusion by those Catholics, but the Catholics, they really venerate Mary, to the annoyance of the Protestants at sometimes. Like, I have seen Protestants accuse Catholics, like in a room, accuse Catholics of worshipping Mary rather than Jesus, so they're not actually Christian. And you're sitting there going, my guy, you're an offshoot of their church. Like, I'm really sorry, but that is like Martin Luther, the Protestant Reformation came from the Catholic Church. Like, I'm really sorry, but what?
Yeah. Sorry, you're not a fan, but like,
yeah.
It just it's so nuts, especially considering the main principle of their faith is never mind the God, we're going to talk about the man who is also the God.
Yeah.
But never mind,
Yeah.
Like it's so silly in so many ways.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
The apparitions, I don't know. They say, oh, well, I've experienced the Holy Spirit. But when the Catholics say they're experiencing Mary's presence, clearly they're delusional. Like, my guy, these are the same thing, effectively,
Wild, right?
My faith in the resurrected Jesus, they don't do very much. And I can tell you why. It's because I don't think that such experiences are unique to the Christian tradition. Although sort of the experience of a bodily risen Christ by multiple people all at once is definitely something that would be unique in history. You don't get group hallucinations of that kind of physical kind. There are a few things I want to say. Firstly, you do have inexplicable group visions of, I think, equally inexplicable events, which I'll give you some examples of. And secondly...
And that was sort of what you were talking about, Ember. The other religions do have inexplicable visions of central figures in their religion. They definitely do. Like, we only hear about the Christian ones because, we live in countries where the Christians are the largest religion, so they're the ones constantly beating the drums. But other religions claim the same thing. Like, just because we're not in a country where over 40% of them are Muslim, is probably the reason why we don't hear about the Muslim ones. Like tons of people have said they saw Muhammad as well. But you discount them offhand.
Oh,
I'm actually
yeah.
not quite
I've
sure.
heard, Mohammed Hijab, I think his name is. I haven't seen him do a debate in a while. He famously did one with Alex O'Connor where he said, "Do you believe the universe began to exist?" And Alex said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Well, that's what we call God," and drops the mic and calls it. So he's not like a very good debater, but
Right.
he's used stuff like that before, where he'd run into somebody who'd bring up near-death experiences and be like, "Well, how do you explain these people saw Jesus?" And he'd say, "Well, I think they saw Muhammad." Like they're assuming Jesus because they're Christians, but it was probably actually Muhammad, though.
Well, I mean, it's kind of odd because the people that see Jesus when they have near-death experiences, generally in Western countries, I'll use that very loosely, but Western and countries that are predominantly white, they will see a Caucasian Jesus, and Jesus was not Caucasian. Like, I'm really sorry. Who was that presenter? I think it was Megyn Kelly said, Jesus, Santa is white kind of thing, or Jesus was white. And it's like, why would he be? Like, if Jesus was Caucasian, the big deal written in these Gospels would be that Jesus wasn't Palestinian or from that area. Like, how could he possibly be Caucasian and be from ancient Palestine? Like, that is ridiculous.
Foreigners from another land or something.
Maybe.
Although you could make a case, actually, maybe somebody already has. I'm probably late to the party because I miss out on a whole lot of the Black Jesus discourse because it's always rich white guys like Trent doing the apologetics. But there's that whole passage in one of the Gospels about how they go hide in Egypt for a couple of years to escape Herod. Maybe when they were in Egypt, Jesus got a tan, or he got exchanged for an Egyptian prophet or chosen one or something. So like you could have a Black Jesus, you could have an Ethiopian skin-toned Jesus.
Sure. But I think that predominantly we would say that Jesus, if he existed, would be Middle Eastern, would be from the area around Judea, which would be essentially Palestinian, so I know that a lot of Jewish people who are sort of racially Jewish, that they will have a big problem with being called white because they're not from Europe. We've got to be clear on this. They are not Caucasian, which is the European races. They are from the Middle East. They're not Arabic, but they're certainly not Caucasian. So I can understand that, like why they've just sort of being lumped in with, white people would be sort of like, well, that's not accurate. Which is fair enough.
In some ways, it's even worse than that because there are ways you could get a Caucasian Jesus. For example, Alexander's empire came through centuries before. The Romans were in charge by the time Jesus came around. There have been European waves of conquest, and that always comes with some intermixing with the local population. So it's not impossible that Jesus was a little peachy colored. But if that's the case, he's not descended from David.
Right, that's what I was about to say. Yeah, because that's one of the things in that Monty Python film, Life of Brian, right? That the Brian character was like his mum said that his father was a Roman kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, you were graped by a Roman? And she's like, well, not really forced. Like she was just like, which the suggestion is that she was, being a prostitute kind of thing, which oldest profession. But then you have to, I think we're in danger of the Catholics going crazy if you suggest that, hey, Mary was a prostitute that slept the Roman kind of thing, and that's why Jesus is portrayed white. I think they would lose their shit.
Even though maybe that's why Jesus was so kind to prostitutes, because he knew the truth about his mom.
Maybe we don't know, but and maybe she didn't tell Joseph about it and said, Oh, it's a miracle. My son. Look, we do know that in the original sort of text that we've found that it wasn't a virgin. Like, it really should be translated as a young woman. So this whole thing of Mary, the virgin birth, it seems to be a mistranslation of the text.
I don't even know if it's a mistranslation so much as a misunderstanding, because there's
Maybe.
still people today who just assume that marriage and having sex are synonymous terms. Like,
Yeah,
they'll say
fair
something
enough.
along the lines of, well, how can she have kids? She isn't married. Like, you don't have to get married for the biology to work, right? It just doesn't occur to them. And so it's not unreasonable to think that people across most of time in under the church, at least, were conflating the ideas of being a virgin and being married. If you would say you're unmarried, everyone just assumes you're a virgin.
Well, no. The mistranslation is of the New Testament authors, because the prophecy of the Messiah is that would it be a man born to and then the word is actually
Alma.
Yes, which means technically a young woman. It doesn't mean virgin. But the idea is, and we don't know this for sure, but the idea is that the New Testament authors said, well, he has to be born of a virgin. So let's make him born of a virgin, not realizing that the translation doesn't mean a literal virgin, it just means a young woman.
The nature.
Just saying, that is a possibility. Now, I'm not saying that is actually so, we don't know, but it is a possibility, because there's no reason why he had to be born of a virgin, like an actual virgin. Virgin? Virgin, yes. I am saying virgin way too much.
Virgin.
Maybe. And as you've pointed out, people have...
story rarer and more magical.
Yeah,
because
that's true. That is true.
Literally, only gods and heroes are said to be born of virgins across all cultures. So
that is true.
If you want to go be a missionary and you open with, so there was this man born of a virgin, they immediately know they're hearing the tale of a god or a hero.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you want to go one further, you say they were raised by wolves, like that's even better.
Sure.
Thanks, Romulus and Remus. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Of the resurrected Jesus as reported in the Gospels. There seems to be at least a bit of a back and forth amongst the Gospel authors and within Paul's letters as to the physicality of Jesus' resurrection, leading some scholars to posit things such as trans-physicality and this kind of stuff to explain why at some points it seems like Jesus is this ghostly figure who tells people not to touch him and can move through walls, and how Paul says that flesh and blood can't inherit the kingdom, and all of this kind of stuff, and 2 Peter talking about how he has this tent of a body that he will one day get rid of, as we've seen Christ essentially do. But at the same time, you have these, I think, polemical moments of Jesus saying, no, like, touch my feet, watch me eat some fish. Which seems like a sort of odd thing to prioritize. Unless you want to say that the glorified, resurrected body gets hungry very easily. It seems strange that one of the first priorities of Jesus would be, give me the fish so I can eat it in front of you and prove that I'm physical. It would seem a little bit strange. On the point of...
Yeah, I don't know about that one. That's kind of weird, yes.
I mean, if I resurrected into a brand new adult body, I would probably be very hungry, because I'd be, however many decades old and have never eaten. Like, I don't know. Just me, though.
Yeah, I absolutely acknowledge that. Absolutely. If you were in a newly resurrected body, but you would think that body would be provided for, if it sort of smacks of a very human need for sustenance kind of thing, even though after the resurrection he's supposed to be beyond all of that. He's then I don't know, it's very strange for somebody to sort of like, look, I'm definitely real, I'm eating this fish.
I wonder why, like, he can conjure fish.
Right. Yes, absolutely controversial. That's the least he can do. Right. Right. I don't... it's weird. It's very strange. I will admit that.
Yeah.
Sort of group hallucinations, as it were. I don't know if these things occur. What I know is that we've got lots of reports throughout history of people claiming.
And I also want to add, how does eating a fish prove that he's the risen Jesus? You know, couldn't it just be some dude eating a fish?
Well, it was written only the risen Savior can eat the catfish or something.
Well, what I find is weird is that he's sent back to, like, he's resurrected, and he sort of says, well, I want you to go around and tell everybody about the resurrection and the promise of the, you know, life after death, basically, the promise of the kingdom kind of thing. And he doesn't look anything like the Jesus beforehand. And there's been a lot of apologetics to sort of say, oh, that's because he was risen in spirit or he was changed by the resurrection kind of thing. But if I was a God that wanted to impress upon these followers the miracles that I can do and that, you know, I wanted to instruct them, why wouldn't you come back looking at least remotely like the person that left? I don't understand that. Like, to me, a more likely scenario is some guy's just pretending to be the risen Jesus. And people have said, oh, well, how do you explain Thomas touching the wounds and the wounds were real? It's like people have survived crucifixion before. We have accounts of people surviving it. Josephus wrote that some person was crucified and then granted mercy by the Roman governor and, you know, lived the rest of his life. There were people around who did survive crucifixion. It did happen. It wasn't necessarily a death sentence.
Yeah,
very
some people
often
put
it
up
was
for a day to humiliate them.
Exactly. That it was used as a punishment, with that punishment sometimes including, you know, a capital punishment, but it wasn't necessarily capital punishment. It was very often capital punishment, but not exclusively. So, you know, I find it odd that he's saying, hey, look at me eat fish. That proves I'm a resurrected person. I can eat fish. It doesn't prove that I'm a resurrected person. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And it's very odd the way that sort of Jesus is going about convincing Thomas in the books. Like, close your eyes and touch. Why does he have to close his eyes? Like, it smacks of a magic trick to me. You know, close your eyes and touch this and you'll find... Why can't he just investigate? Well, you know, it's just it's just weird that he's going, we'll investigate, find out if I am the Jesus that died, but close your eyes while you do it. What? It's weird, right? Like, I find it strange, personally.
Like, if he has a different face, why does he still have the holes in his body? It just...
Yeah, it's weird.
The holes in the plot are bigger than the holes in his hands.
Right.
I mean, see some very strange things. I like to talk about Mormonism, and I like to do it for a few reasons. Firstly, because it usually offers a bit of a sort of left field comparison for Christians, but also in this context, I know that Trent has spent a lot of time looking into Mormonism and debating Mormonism. I would like to tell people, for example, that if you pick up any copy of the Book of Mormon, it always begins with testimonies from first the 3 witnesses and then secondly the 8 witnesses. And these are men who claimed to see, in the first instance, Joseph Smith, the golden plates of Joseph Smith be handed by an angel to Joseph Smith. Now, those first 3 witnesses claim that they saw this. Now, it's a little bit complicated because it's like 2 of them saw it at the same time and then 1 of them saw it later. And you might say that he was hallucinating, but I would say, how do you account for the corroboration between that and the other 2? At the very least, these men who claimed to see something, again, collectively, which I don't think Trent can grant happened. I don't think he can grant that an angel gave Joseph Smith the golden plates.
Well, he can. He's not gonna, but he can. Look, yeah. So I love this comparison that O'Connor is doing, because he's basically like, to what you said, Ember, there is accounts by other people of supernatural things happening, yet a Christian will reject that those things happened, even though, like, not only is there corroboration, but we have their names. We know their history. You know, these were real people that obviously say they saw this thing. Now, I don't believe it either. I don't believe it, but I don't believe that people saw Jesus rise either.
Right. It's much like the Sai Baba thing that we bring up from time to time, where every single metric of evidence for Jesus is met and exceeded in both quality and accuracy, and like there's video recordings and shit, like, and yet they don't believe it, even though it's the same evidence, but all of it an order higher in accuracy, in reliability.
Yes. And yet they would absolutely reject that. But why is the question? Why reject it if you'll accept it for Christianity? Accept that you are in Christianity, and so you have a lower epistemic bar for your own religion. I would hope that even as an atheist, if somebody came to me and said, hey, I saw this, I would have the same epistemic bar, the same, criticality of their claim as everything else, right? Like, so if someone comes to me and says, hey, and something that you said the other day on sort of a group chat, the proto cell that they've made, the spud cell, right? Like, I wouldn't just go, Right. They just wouldn't absolutely believe it just on Ember. And Ember's she's a good friend of mine, right? Like, I generally believe her because she's reliable, but I still would like the paper to see it for myself and see what the actual paper is. Like, I don't just go, oh, well, Ember's absolutely right no matter what she says. That isn't what's happening. I would hope that I would hold the same amount of skepticism for a extravagant claim that an atheist makes as an extravagant claim that a Christian makes, if that makes sense.
Right, and there's a second factor to that. Like, first of all, being a mortal, I can make mistakes. I've done it in the past,
Sure. Absolutely.
Thinking back to the first time Leophilius was in my chat when I screwed up the speed of an electron, and he just corrected me right on the spot.
Yep.
I'm like, whoops. But yeah, and when we make mistakes, we own up to it because we're fucking adults. But that's a side thing. I'm capable of error. The other thing is curiosity. When someone presents me with a fantastical claim, I want to know more. I'm like, show me the paper. I want to read about this. I'm interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope we would hold ourselves the same standards. If I said something that was just, really incredible, and somebody said, hey, I want more information, I don't believe it, I wouldn't take it badly. Like, I wouldn't say, how dare you question, I'm not going to throw pearls before swine kind of thing. No, it'd be like, hey, this is the paper that I have. This is the information that I have. If they don't believe it, well, you don't believe it. You don't believe me. That's fine. I don't get upset about it. I think it is very telling that Christians will get upset that you don't believe their claims. I think it's very telling that somebody who has a great deal of evidence for what they are presenting will just go, well, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it. That's on you. I don't, I've got the evidence here. But yeah, I would hope that people would check my information. I'm human as well. I make mistakes. Sure. Absolutely. I would hope people fact check me. And if you do, let me know. If you think I'm wrong, absolutely let me know. I don't want to convey wrong information. But, the reality is that a person can only learn so much. So they will convey wrong information at some point in their life. You just have to accept that. You're going to be wrong about stuff. The question is, are you going to have a methodology that says, could I be wrong? I want to check and make sure I have the best chance of being right. Or are you just going to say, well, I've got faith and keep on believing? There's all these problems that I have faith. I know which one I'd rather do.
And yet they claim to have seen this. And there's something extra here that you don't get in the Christian tradition, which is that it's kind of a reverse Paul. People often say, well, Paul used to persecute Christians, so why would he see this vision? This is the other way around, and I think therefore stronger. All three of these men were eventually excommunicated from the Mormon church. They fell out with Joseph Smith, and they were excommunicated from the church. Yet until the day of their death, they asserted that they had seen the Book of Mormon. It's complicated. As Trent knows, Martin Harris is said to have sort of seen the plates with his spiritual eyes. So I'm attempting to draw an analogy here, right? So Martin Harris is one of the three witnesses, the other being Oliver Cowdery and David Whitman.
And we have the names, you know, and that is a really good point. I think you've brought that up before as well, Ember, that all three of them were excommunicated, thrown out of the church. If anybody had a motivation for saying, hey, yeah, I actually kind of made that up, no, it's not real, it's just a big con job, these guys would have the motivation to do so. Yet they
and
didn't.
not even just to be honest, like say, you know what, now that I'm not compelled, I can come clean, but even to be dishonest in the other direction, to try to smear the name of the church and be like, you know what, even though they did see something, to go around and say, I didn't see it, he's been lying, you know, they had every reason to do that, and they didn't, and it's weird.
Well, not really when you understand religion kind of thing. It's not that weird, you know, because these sort of core beliefs that people have, they get so invested in them that you know, that they struggle to let them go. We see this all the time. People that even they don't believe in Jesus, they don't believe in, they've left the church, they've left everything, and they still have this overwhelming feeling, this dread that hell is real. Even though that consciously they don't believe in it, they still have this. It's very hard to change those core beliefs that you know you've subscribed to. You're absolutely convinced of. So I don't think that it would be that unusual for someone to leave a religion yet keep some of the beliefs of that religion. We see it all the time. All the time.
Yeah. Well, also, I suppose it's worth noting that just because they've been excommunicated by the church doesn't mean they no longer believe the religion. They're just not part of the organization anymore.
Well, yeah, these guys, I mean, it's not just that they left the church. They had like a massive falling out with Joseph Smith, and they kind of hated each other.
Tends to happen.
Yeah.
A lot of these. I mean, look what happened to Islam in the first generation.
But here is I get the point that O'Connor's making, but is he trying to cut off any sort of... So a lot of the time, what is leveraged in Christian debate is, oh, Paul did this miraculous conversion kind of thing, and he was the last person to support Christianity, or the apostles believed this till their dying day and they died for their faith, which I don't think is true, but that is something that is leveraged, sort of this, well, people that believe, like, knew the truth, that it was just made up, wouldn't have done that. And I think he's pointing out that, hey, you think that Mormonism isn't true, but the same could be said for, you know, the founding fathers of Mormonism. They were completely excommunicated from the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they still, to their dying day, attested that they'd seen the angel and stuff. Is that what he's doing? Trying to make that comparison?
I think so, yeah, because there's people will believe stuff even in opposition of reason to, is sort of what we've been driving at. I'm stuck on Islam because, like, after Muhammad died, there was a similar schism. You know, it was about inheritance of who would get the caliphate, and the Sunnis went one way and the Shias went another way. Both groups said the other was wrong, obviously, but like the group that ended up on the downside of that, who basically got kicked out of the rest of Islam, which I believe was the Shia, but I could be mistaken on that. It's been a while since I read up on the ancient history of Islam. I actually did read up on it, but it was a while ago. It's
Shia is definitely the one that is least prevalent within Muslim societies. Yes.
Yeah, But like they could have done a similar thing. They could have said, well, fine, if we're out, then we're just going to say that the prophet was lying, that all of it is
Right.
just a made up story. Similar thing with the Mormons. Instead
Right.
of saying it's all lies, they just went off and did their own thing under the same mythology.
Yeah. But I guess that what I'm sort of saying is that I think he's making a good point. Like, I'm not going to take away the point that Alex O'Connor's making, but he's not really addressing what Trent Horn has put out there. Maybe he's sort of giving his kind of introduction, like that he's not rebutting yet for some reason, but he's not really rebutting all of the people that have seen visions or claim to have seen visions, kind of thing. I think he really needs to address that and sort of say, hey, well, for a start, Bruce hallucinations may be rare, but they do happen, and they can happen in times of heightened emotion like you would expect from a religious congregation, right? Number two is there's no good filmography of any of these events, right? There were cameras available at the time in Cairo, Egypt, and nobody thought to take one and film it. That is strange. That is weird. You could say that, hey, as our ability to record and document these events has generally gotten better across the populace due to technology, smartphones and such, these events have vanished. And that I think is a good point. Like, if you were a god and you wanted to convince people, doing a Fatima miracle in front of, a wide, diverse cultural background of people in a city right now would be a good way to do it, right? Like, everybody...
Why not in Rome?
Sorry?
Why not in Rome?
In Rome? Like, if you appear in New York, where there's Muslims and Christians and atheists and all different types of people, and they all see the same thing and all record it on their smartphones. That would be pretty convincing, right? That would be something that would be remarkable. Like, but a god would know that would be a good thing to do to convince people, but doesn't do it. So why not? It seems wild. Why not?
And in 1838, Stephen Burnett claims that Martin Harris didn't see it with his natural eyes, but that it was a kind of vision. But then Martin Harris later said, look, as surely as I see my hands, I saw the golden plates. What I want to point out is that there are analogues here, which is that you've got this sort of claim of group appearances, which seem a little bit strange. You've got this kind of reason why maybe they wouldn't want to make this claim. And then you've got this slight debate over, well, was it physical? Was it spiritual? We're not entirely sure. Yeah. People often talk about the persecution of the apostles. So when I bring up the Mormon church, people say, oh yeah, but you don't understand that Christians were persecuted. They were put to death by Nero and Diocletian. And I'm like, have you looked into Mormon history? Do you not know that in the lifetimes of these witnesses and other witnesses to Mormon miracles, Mormons were persecuted by the United States of America? There was the Mormon Extermination Act.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I would say, I don't know, persecution seems like a little bit harsh, because the Mormons were really, they really were not just a nuisance, but a menace, right? The early Mormon church had an idea of basically creating a theocracy inside America. They wanted a system where their elders and the leaders of the church was in charge of that. They were trying to found a sort of a theocratic nation within America, which, and they weren't shy about doing it either. They really were causing a lot of problems for people trying to take over towns, and they had their own army. That's what people forget. They literally had their own army with guns, sort of trying to take over places. This is why they had such a... So, I get you, persecution, okay, but I don't think the Latter-day Saints were blameless in all of this. I think that they were really, committing crimes, what a sense amounts to crimes, throughout, and were sort of very thuggish in doing so. The idea of the the smiling, generous, happy, nice Mormon that we get today is not how the church originally functioned.
Yeah, like in Missouri where all this happened, it was a Missouri state executive order, not like a federal act of Congress kind of thing. But they called it the Mormon Wars. Like there were 15,000 troops just going from city to city, wiping out the local militias. And so the governor's like, they're an invading army, wipe them out. You know?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Like, don't get me wrong. I think that they can sort of say, hey, we were persecuted. And to that partially is probably true that the Mormons were considered they definitely weren't recognized as a religion, and they definitely were held as lower class citizens. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that didn't happen, but I think that more has to be said about they kind of did things that eventuated in that. They kind of were very aggressive in the way that they tried to establish their religious society that a lot of these states did not like at all. I can say I wouldn't like it either.
In Missouri, which literally called the extermination and expulsion of Mormons. They were chased out of basically every state that they went into. In other words, I'd like to know how we explain that. There's then the 8 witnesses who don't witness the angel, but they do witness the golden plates. 8 of them who, again, 3 of those guys also lose touch with the Mormon church, fall out with Joseph Smith and get excommunicated, but still attest that that's what they saw. More to the point, though, there's this extraordinary event which I found when I was researching the history of the Mormon church a while ago, which is a transfiguration event. It's absolutely extraordinary. So in 1844, I'm sure Trent will be familiar with this. In 1844, there was something of a success.
I just got to point out the look on his face. It's like, yeah, I'm aware of it. I don't like it, but I'm aware of it. It's kind of like this image of distaste.
I really, well, he knows what Alex is doing. Alex is throwing out these fun fact tidbits that I'm sure Trent's already familiar with this.
Yeah.
But it's kind of clear at this point, and Trent is definitely aware of this, that he's stacking up Lego pieces that he's then going to push over onto Trent.
Because if Trent's going to, well, sort of say, well, we don't have hard evidence, but all of this cumulative evidence of supernatural things and, people that saw something and didn't recant even though they were, trying to force to, and all of this stuff, you could make the same case for Mormonism. So I think that really he is pointing out intellectual inconsistency. When you will grant certain things based to your religion, other religions have the same claims, but you don't just grant them offhand like you do your own. You basically say, well, no, you've got to absolutely show that, even though you can't do it for your own. And it's a very, very powerful thing to show. Like if I sort of said, hey, I don't believe Christianity's claim of 500 witnesses just on one person say so, or a couple of people say so, but I'll believe Ember when they say this thing. That's intellectual inconsistency, right? Like if you're making that claim, I would expect Ember to have evidence that that is true. Like I don't just say, hey, whatever Ember says, I believe. That is not what happens. What Ember will say is this thing, and I'll say, that sounds cool. Do you have a paper for that? And Ember will go, yes, absolutely. And I'd love to share it with you because Ember doesn't just make crap up.
And I do love to share papers.
You definitely do. Look at the thing. I'm all on board. Absolutely.
Succession crisis, right? Joseph Smith had died and they didn't know who was going to be the next leader. So they called a conference in August, on the 8th of August. Brigham Young is one of the speakers. Now, we know from Brigham Young's later diaries that he says that there were thousands of people present. He says there were thousands of people at this conference. So let's say there were at least a few hundred. And amazingly, George Cannon writes in 1870, which is just 26 years later, that Brigham Young, while speaking, but vying for the leadership, transfigures into the image and likeness and voice of Joseph Smith. He says, who that was present on that occasion can ever forget the impression it made upon them? If Joseph had risen from the dead and spoken in their hearing, the effect could not have been more startling than it was to many present at that meeting. So we've got this report of probably hundreds of people seeing quite a miraculous event. Now you could say, well, that report comes 26 years later. Okay, and how much later were Paul's reports? How much later were the gospel reports? Also note that in 1857, which is just 13 years after this event, after the Transfiguration, you have Albert Carrington's experience recorded, where Carrington says that, well, Brigham Young recounts Albert Carrington's experience and says that Carrington says that people could not tell him from Joseph Smith and could not see anyone but Joseph speaking. What you'll notice is that there's still this evidence that there's some kind of transfigurative event, but much less detailed, but much more close to the source. In 1869, 25 years later, so somewhere in the middle, Orson Hyde, who was an early Mormon leader, confirms the event, saying it was the voice of Joseph and there were the features, gestures, and even the stature of Joseph. So what we have are three independent, in one case, eyewitness account, because Orson Hyde was actually speaking on the same day at the conference, eyewitness accounts of a transfiguration of Brigham Young in front of hundreds of witnesses, many of whom, in the words of George Cannon, he says, who was present on that occasion that could ever forget this? In other words, if you're in any doubt about this, you could go and ask the witnesses who were there. Now, shelve that for a moment and think about how people talk about things like Trent's already mentioned the appearances that Paul recounts in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul says that Jesus appeared to Peter, which is strange because we don't get that narrated in the gospel stories, even though that seems to be the first and most important.
Right. Peter doesn't say that Jesus first appeared to him, which is kind of weird, right? Like, Paul says that happened, but we've got the writings of Peter, and he doesn't say that happened. Like, it's weird, right? It's like the empty grave thing. It's sort of like this piece of evidence that would be very, very, very important, incredibly important, and it's just absent out of the person's writing. But Paul comes along later and said, oh, well, all this stuff happened. Well, not later, but he says all of these things happened. But the other attestations don't have it. Why not? Weird.
Yeah, it's Sherlock Holmes is the dogs that didn't bark. They should be barking. Like, why aren't they? Something's amiss.
Something is a bit fucky wucky there, as we say. A bit, yeah.
But, I mean, most pressingly, Paul says that Jesus appears to 500 people, as above 500 people, probably more than possibly above in a visionary experience. That's something else. And people say, look, this is our only source. But, Paul says some of these people are still alive. So if you were in any doubt, you could just go and ask them.
Right.
And I would say, well, why didn't people go and ask about the Mormon transfiguration experiences? Perhaps because if you read George Q. Cannon's account, it's not clear who these people are. I mean, people often say this. They say, those 500 people, some of them are still alive, so you could have gone and checked. How? You're just going to walk to Jerusalem, which has tens of thousands of people at minimum in it, and just start asking around and see if anyone's seen the risen Christ? How many no's would it take before you said, okay, maybe?
Okay, this is an excellent point. This is a fantastic point. That when you quote like 500 people saw it, but don't give names or anything, but you can check with them to see that is the case. You're not actually providing a way to check. You're not actually providing evidence of, this is a confirmable thing. Because, as he points out, how many people were in Jerusalem at that point? Which 500? Now, it may be more significant to people in the church, right? Like, you can check with these people in your church kind of thing, because that would narrow it down significantly. But still, it does nothing for anybody outside of the church, who probably aren't going to check anyway because they're already believers. Right? I mean...
So... Roman censuses seem to have gotten a little sloppy in the first century, but So in the first century, the population of Jerusalem was somewhere between 30,000 and 100,000.
Yeah, that sounds
It's not
right.
millions, but it's going to make finding 500 a challenge.
Yeah.
Maybe not then. In other words, I have no idea why Paul says that Jesus appeared to 500 people. We don't know that Paul was there. He probably wasn't. He says he's passing down something that was passed on to him, which says that it's an early creed. But we're not quite sure where that creed ends, because Paul inserts himself at the end of it. But we don't know where he's heard it from. We don't know who these 500 people are. We don't know why they were gathered. We don't know how many of them believed. We don't know if any of them recounted. We don't know anything about this kind of event. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying that compared to something like the events of the Transfiguration of Brigham Young, from someone like outside of all of this, who has no vested interest here really, I see them as equally plausible, perhaps more plausible in the case of Mormonism, because that happened in the 1800s. And we have at least one eyewitness account that says that he saw it directly. We don't have anything like that for the Gospels. The only eyewitness account that we have for the resurrection of Jesus, the only one, is Paul, who did not see a bodily resurrected Christ, but saw a flash in the sky and heard a voice, which is not the same kind of thing.
Trent, I'd love to hear your response to two things there. The first being this broader...
Well, that's assuming that the Gospels aren't written, well, the Gospels are anonymous, but that's assuming the Gospels weren't written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Paul. You know, like that's assuming that. I don't know whether that would be the case. There's definitely good evidence that one of them was definitely. I don't think that Mark wrote Mark, you know, because it refers to Mark in the text. Which, unless he's doing a third person thing, it's highly unlikely. But yeah.
Similar thing with a bunch of the others, but like there's ancient historians who refer to I forget if it's Mark or Matthew, but they refer to it as a poetic epic, which is not what we got. There's another book that's referred to as songs, like hymns, gospel music sort of thing. And that's not what we got for that book. You know, there's the historians who do refer to these things are referring to different books than the books we have now. The names just got attached to the ones we have now.
Yeah.
Comparison with Mormonism, and secondly, this idea that Paul didn't believe in a physical resurrection.
Sure. So let me start with Paul. I would say that Paul, being a Pharisee, was firmly committed to the idea that resurrection is bodily. When we see in his letters, he is dealing with the Corinthians. He's dealing actually with skeptical people. People at that time didn't necessarily believe everything that was pitched to them. So in 1 Corinthians 15, he's dealing with people who can't even believe there's going to be a bodily resurrection, or what is that going to be like? That I think many people, when they hear about this, they think, oh, I'm going to be a zombie. Like the skeleton gets out of the ground and the flesh is drooping off of it. Like who wants to have that? And Paul is saying, no, you're not going to be that, but you're not going to be just a disembodied spirit either. In his letter to the Corinthians, he's very clear when he says that he compares being a disembodied spirit to being naked without clothes or naked outside of a tent, a condition you don't want to be in. Rather, what he says, like in Philippians 3:21, Paul says that God will change our lowly bodies to conform to his glorious physical body. So he often talks about not being.
Wait, God has a physical body?
So, some interpretations of certain books, like in Exodus, Moses gets to see God's. Certain interpretations say that Moses got to see God's face. No one can see God's face, but Moses got to see God's face. But it's a whole thing. Sometimes he has a physical body.
Yeah. I just have to point out something to Proben Time here. I used to work in the telecommunications industry in Australia, so I kind of know sort of what the tricks are, kind of thing. So yeah.
Why don't we see more transfigurations? Like, why isn't Trent able to, as a holy believer person, like channel the voice of Jesus to defend himself the same way Brigham Young could like become Joseph Smith? Seems like the kind of thing we'd see more often.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know a lot about Brigham Young. All I know is he made a university. He founded a university. That's about all. I think that, I don't know. I have no idea.
Clothed in immortality, having a physical body that is not limited by the physics of this universe. So, for example, like you don't have to be a ghostly presence to walk through walls. Technically speaking, in a physical body, you're mostly empty space. If you think about the space between atoms and electrons, if you had
my guy, you're appealing to science for your miracles. No. Like, technically you could walk through a wall, but then like all of electromagnetism wouldn't work. Like you'd have to stop the entire idea of solid things. Like I love how Alex O'Connor is laughing as well. It's kind of a bit ridiculous. Yeah.
omnipotent control over now you can't walk through solid substances because of nuclear force. But if you had a bit more control over the universe, you could pass solid objects through one another through a kind of phasing, if you will. So I think those descriptions showing that Jesus has a physical body, like eating fish, showing I'm not a ghost, I'm not a spirit, I am the inauguration of the resurrection, which was unheard of for Jews at that time before the end of the world. That's striking that they proclaim Jesus rose, not just that he was in heaven, not just that he was in Abraham's bosom, that he rose. The reference to Jesus, when Paul says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom, he uses that as a Semitism, a Jewish way of speaking about the world. Worldly things that are merely material cannot inherit the kingdom. You have to be spiritual. So we often think of spiritual like a substance, but spiritual also means an orientation. Like if I say the Bible's a spiritual.
What the hell is he talking? Okay, so we think of spiritual as a substance. Well, not really. It depends on context. So here's the important part. Okay, so wow, what Alex is doing right now is just hilarious because he's absolutely loving this. Because Trent's sort of saying, well, spiritual is material and non-material at the same time. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like this nonsensical stuff is, you know, he's loving it. Because this is exactly where he wants to be, where you are holding two disparate ideas both at once. So we don't think of spiritual as anything. Okay, Trent, for a start, that is not what an atheist thinks of as spiritual. When he's saying we think of spirituality as this, he might be referring to Christians, but Christians disagree, right? Like they say, oh, it's a spiritual thing. To me as an atheist, that just means it's something to do with beliefs or religion or, abstractions, basically, right? Like your spiritual journey is just more a journey of self-discovery, right? Like it's nothing, that's to me. But to others, it is something more significant. But he's sort of saying, hey, when we think of spiritual, we think of something solid, something actually there. Well, some theists do. Some don't. I think that's the whole point. You guys can't solidify what a definition of spiritual or supernatural or any of these things is. Like, what is spiritual? And really, I think that part of why Alex is so happy right now is because you're not defining spiritual at all. At all. Right? You're just sort of saying, hey, this is what we think of it as. What is it? Native Atheist with $5. Thank you, Native Atheist. Keep it real. I try, my guy. I try. But thank you, Native Atheist. That's awesome. I do try to keep it real. It's difficult when people are, but he's basically saying, hey, spiritual is non-material, but your spiritual body will be material. Like, what are you talking about?
I just love that expression on Alex's face, though.
Yes. Look, if
so
I'm ever in a debate against Alex O'Connor for some reason, I'm not sure, we probably agree on a lot, but if I'm ever in a debate and he starts looking like that, I am going to literally shit myself, okay? I'm going to go, this guy's about to hand me my ass. Because that is a man who has heard something that he can rip the crap out of. And, I would expect him to do exactly that. But I think it might also be just sort of amusement that Trent Horn's sort of trying to explain spirituality in the form of bodily resurrection. Does that make sense to anybody?
I could come up with some kind of bullshit, but that's all it would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Book, it's not going to pass through you if I throw it at you. So I would say that when it comes to Paul, I think we have what manifests the movement of Christianity is this radical proclamation of the resurrection that I would say makes the most sense with an encounter with the risen Jesus that could be cross-checked by seeing, for example, that his tomb is empty. Like if I had a friend, in fact, actually, I gave a eulogy once for a friend who died when she was 19 years old. I gave a eulogy at the funeral. That night, I had a dream. She sat at the foot of my bed and we talked, and it felt really, really real. But I woke up and realized, okay, that's just a vision. And in the New Testament, they talk about visions, a vision in the night. They know the difference between visions and seeing someone. But if I...
Yeah, but I mean, if you do live in a society where magic and, miracles and supernatural things are considered the norm, you might, and people have thought that vision is actually real. That person who died came and talked to me. There's people that believe that. I mean, I like that Trent Horn is sane and cognizant enough to determine between a dream vision, or sort of what do they call it when you sort of have autonomy in your dreams? Lucid dream, right? And reality, right? He knows that that's not real. It's just a dream. But there are people that can't do that in our society with our modern understanding right now. There's people that can't distinguish between the two. So, like, just because you can determine the difference doesn't mean someone in ancient Palestine can determine the difference.
Saw that in broad daylight. I go and dig up her casket, and if it's empty, I would have had questions. Now, when it comes to Mormonism, I appreciate Alex getting into this. I knew a little while ago, Alex, I feel like the Mormons were like, Alex is almost here. He's ready to be Mormon.
Have a lot of that.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
I saw.
Yeah, and they're not the only ones. Alex apparently, allegedly, has been close to converting to everything from Scientology to Muslim and all the flavors of Christian along the way. Like, I have seen people jump on one thing he said saying, hey, I can't prove this didn't happen, or I can't prove that Jesus didn't write, and say, look, he's almost a Christian. And it's like, oh, wow.
A bit of that, and I was like, wow, if you knew Alex's take on things like young earth creationism, why don't you get Alex's take on the Mormon view of history? I think he's going to be much more skeptical of that. I think this is important, though. That's why I brought up about Mary and Zaytoun.
Yeah, and that's something that I could not accept about Mormonism. The whole going in a submarine from Israel to the New World, the insane sort of racial divides in the New World, and just the story is just so unbelievable. And I mean unbelievable as in you should not believe it. Like, it's a fantastical story. And having pigs and horses in ancient North America, where they definitely did not exist.
Horses, you say? I think there it is.
There it is.
Behold, the Mormon horses.
Well, I mean, they appeal to the tapir, right? Or actually, they appeal to, for pigs, they appeal to the peccary, which is like a South American. It's not a pig, but it's a pig-like creature. They say, oh, they're talking about, but they weren't present in North America either. So you're still out of luck, like, come on. And yeah, so, yeah, wild.
I think, and I don't want to drone on and on. I'll get to this, but there's a lot to respond to. But I think, Alex, you'd be sensitive. Many skeptics, when they look at Christians, are probably saying, let's make sure we're on the same page here. Look, if you're going to follow evidence, that's all fine and dandy. But I want to see that you are following it consistently.
Yes.
If you're carving out special exceptions for what you believe, and then you're dismissive of all the other stuff, well, now you see where I'm coming from. So I think that's the challenge in defense. I think that's, at least I'm seeing that more now. The challenge is, all right, let's follow your standards of evidence that will only show Jesus' resurrection and Christian miracles, but not necessarily non-Christian things.
Yes.
Yes, because if you are basing your belief on the belief that these miraculous things happen for your own religion, you would have to be intellectually consistent. If other things had miraculous events, you'd have to believe that religion as well. And then that gets you into trouble because they're contradictory, right? You can't believe that Krishna created humanity and Yahweh created humanity, or God created humanity. That is a contradiction. Unless you're taking it as, oh, well, all religions are one, like the sort of universalist position that, hey, they're all religions are the reflection of the same truth kind of thing, then, like, those are contradictory. Two different gods can't have created the same world or the same people or the same humanity. Like, it's just not possible.
Oh, I will. So is that a fair summary of that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay. So my reply then, and I think this is getting back to what I said earlier about like evangelical apologists that have frequently engaged in this, or other Christians. There are some Christians who hold to a view that's called, in Christian theology, there's a debate between cessationism and continuationism? Do divine charisms, do miracles happen after the apostolic age?
Yeah.
And there are some Christians who say, no, that's all frauds. The miracles ended with the death of the apostles. And then there are more Pentecostal Christians who say, well, no, God still performs miracles. And as a Catholic, we're certainly continuationists. We have saints that have been proclaimed to do all kinds of different miracles. And I would say with pretty good evidence behind several of them. So we would say, well, no.
Yeah, I think your idea of pretty good evidence and my idea of pretty good evidence are very, very different things, Trent. I think that if you, and this goes back to Alex's point, if your idea of pretty good evidence is a whole bunch of people saying they did a miracle, then other religions would have to have people performing miracles as well. Right? That's the whole point. You will say, oh, well, people said that Mother Teresa was made a saint because a number of people said, oh, this thing happened, and I was praying to Mother Teresa at the time. And they don't, they say they really investigate it, but I don't think they investigate it that thoroughly. They just say, hey, if a number of people say this happened, it happened, and they make her a saint, and they say that she's responsible for a miracle. But if that's the case, then a lot of different religions have said that their leaders, their people have done these miraculous things. So why don't you believe them? This is the whole point. You'll only believe the Catholic ones. And they probably won't even believe other Christian ones. Like the Pentecostal came forward and said, hey, someone was praying to, Ken Ham after he's dead, and suddenly this miraculous thing happened. The Catholic Church wouldn't go, well, that's obviously a saint. They wouldn't do that. Not even if 100 people said it. They would say, well, that's not a Catholic. That can't have been a miracle. Can't have been.
No miracles for you.
No Ken Ham miracles, no.
There's no reason to shut that off. So I think that some people who defend the resurrection, they're very, very skeptical of paranormal or post-apostolic miracles when they shouldn't be. Now, I don't believe all of them. I think some have bad evidence for them or insufficient evidence. Likewise, when it comes to non-Christian religions, I think that God could perform miracles or signs or wonders among non-Christians, and that could still be harmonious with Christian theology.
Yes.
Because God loves everybody. So if a Buddhist prays in the middle of a flood to be saved, God might miraculously save her because he loves that person. He loves her without necessarily endorsing the truth of Buddhism. The problem I think that you might raise is you might say, yes, that's all fine and dandy, all fine and good. But what about these things that appear to be miracles?
But, okay, so Trent's missing a vital part here, which is you are leveraging your belief in your religion on these miracles happening. But it's specifically his religion or denomination or his one. Right? Like, if the Buddhist is praying and getting miracles, how do you know it's not Buddha doing it for you?
Exactly.
Right? How do you know that your miracles aren't, in fact, Buddha loving everybody and, giving miracles to you? How do you know it's your version, not the other way round? Mm-hmm. This is the problem. Right? Is it that you have more miracles, then it's just a case of, well, whoever claims the most miracles is the one that wins. That isn't really a solution to it. Or, a majority of more people are Christians than Buddhists, so when Buddha does miracles, it mostly goes to Christians. You have a problem here. Right? Like, because you are leveraging that miracle to be why you believe in your specific religion. Not just a God, and I feel like he's really riding that Mott and Bailey fallacy while he's sort of, when they're sort of, oh, but it shows a God, not my God, just any God at all, this vague notion of a God, it can be anyone. And I know that he is not a universalist that will say, hey, Buddha and Jesus are reflections of the same God. I don't think he's that. But he's sort of going, well, if a Buddhist can produce a miracle, it's actually my God. How do you know that? How do you know it's not Krishna doing it, and it's not Buddha or Jesus doing these miracles, right? Like, it could be a third party, and you both could be wrong.
It's the magical fairies that are just taking pity on these silly believers.
Right.
That appear to endorse a competing theology. Yeah. So when I would look at miracle claims for a competing theology, there's two options here. One, I could say that there's a natural explanation that we're overlooking. Two, there could be a supernatural, or there could be a supernatural malevolent explanation, that's demonically inspired. Now, one might say that's kind of, are you going to say everything that's not you is a demon? That's kind of a cop-out. No,
Demon.
I think that we can apply tests to see, is the message driving people away from.
Yeah, that's I don't forget it. Somebody's demon, like is it Maxwell's demon? The one that sort of says, "Hey, how do you know it's not an evil demon that is tricking you," kind of thing, and they can't really prove it.
Descartes uses something similar.
Oh, maybe
It's
it is
not-
Descartes.
Maxwell doesn't, but like, I'm curious how Trent thinks we can test for a demon, because if we can test for a demon, we could probably test for an angel too, since they're the same thing.
Right. Yeah, basically.
True theology about Jesus. Now, with Mormonism, I'm kind of on the fence about this one, Alex. I think there are very compelling natural explanations for many of the things you brought up, and I think some of them there could be demonic explanations, or it could be both. Maybe it started as a hoax, and the devil kind of runs with it, like in the case you gave. The case you gave about the transfiguration.
But there's a problem there, that they could just say, "Hey, we think that the Catholic Church was infested by demons and all of their miracles are just the demons convincing them." And I know that this is something that is said because Protestants have said that the Catholic Church became corrupted by the devil. Like, seriously, I have heard this said, that the Catholic Church, the majority church in America, is all just corrupt and they lost their way ages ago. And when Martin Luther did the Reformation, he was actually with the right religion and left the Catholics because they were horrendously corrupted by evil. So how do you know that the Catholic Church isn't the one following all of these devilish magics that happen? Well, we don't.
Oh, so much devilry.
Oh, you're right.
wild.
You're right. Yeah, no, Maxwell's is the entropy shade. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. No, it's definitely Descartes that I'm thinking of. Descartes.
I mean, Maxwell's demon is fun too.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds a lot like people could be, really, really enthralled with a religious speaker at an event. They're at essentially a rally type atmosphere where you're already religiously primed for a speaker. And they're talking about how, oh, you sound just like him. It's like I have Sean McDowell here, and maybe he could give a talk at a evangelical church, and they're like, my goodness, Sean, I saw your dad Josh on stage when you were talking. It was just like him. And it's like, well, he's a lot like Josh. That's probably true. And then, kind of that sounds a little bit different than me than saying, yeah, my rabbi that was crucified 3 days ago and put in a tomb, we saw him. He was eating. He appeared to different groups of people.
Yeah, but I do want to mention that they didn't recognize him at first. Right, that he didn't look anything like Jesus, and then as they talk to him, they're like, "Oh, you are the Jabba." Like, what's the difference here? I don't get the difference between the transfiguration of Brigham Young and people that don't recognize somebody as Jesus, and after they talk to him, they're like, "Well, you're obviously the rabbi that died 3 days ago because you sound so much like him, and we realize that you're like him." Like, what's the difference, my guy? I don't understand.
It's a weird, like, it's clearly not the same phenomenon, but like, why does Jesus even have to
Sure.
resurrect if transfigurations are possible? Why doesn't he just like inhabit this other dude's body? And that's why he looks different. Maybe Jesus is a demon. Maybe that's why he had authority over the other demons. He could cast out the
Maybe.
swine because they were in on the scam together. And so
Right.
when Jesus was crucified, the demon Christ just hopped into the next convenient body.
Yeah, so maybe he put them there in the so it's like that analogy of the arsonist that like helps put out a fire kind of thing. They set the fire in
Yeah.
the first place, or Trump starting a war and then like taking the credit for ending it, and it's like, my guy, you started it. Like, maybe that's what he's doing. Sure. How do you know that's the case? Because he's very quick to leverage against other things, like, oh, well, you're saying I see somebody that looks like who do you say, Sean McDowell? Like, you look like your father who has passed away. Like, it's just, it's basically a metaphor. It's an analogy. But then you've got to leverage the same thing against the apostles. Like, how do you know that they're not just giving the analogy that, Jesus has risen because somebody is talking exactly like him? right? That it is this transfiguration thing. I don't know. It's very weird. But he just doesn't want, he wants that to be out of the question. While at the same time, really sort of demanding a high bar for others to sort of say, hey, that did actually happen and it's not just analogy.
So that example I don't think is as compelling to me. The other examples, I think there's really way more disanalogous elements between the resurrection claim and Mormonism. I could briefly run through them. We can unpack. Like I said, I don't want to go too on, but you threw a lot out there. So a few elements there. One, the people who saw the golden plates, that doesn't do much for me. They could have been natural artifacts.
Yep.
In 1843, there were people who created a hoax set of plates called the Kinderhook plates that Joseph went to engage and read. So those could have been natural artifacts. It could have been hoaxes. I'm not as impressed by that. The three witnesses who saw the angel, when you look through, there's a lot of discrepancies. It seems like they had to go, and Joseph led them out there. Remember, he's already trying to convince them of this. Whereas with the apostles, all of them are starting with a blank slate. Jesus is dead. What do we do? Joseph is trying to convince these two people. One of them, Martin Harris, who
Can I just point out, yeah, they're going on a lot. And I totally grant Trent Horn is saying, hey, I don't want to go on too much, but there's a lot to cover. He's basically saying, hey, I'm not trying to gish gallop. And I think that that's fair enough, right? Alex did cover a lot of stuff, and so did Trent. And that's perfectly fine. Like, this isn't gish gallop. You are going through a lot of points. But what I love is the moderator is allowing it. And more importantly, Alex is allowing Trent to cover all that he needs to cover, and Trent is allowing Alex to cover all that he needs to cover. So this is why I really do like this particular debate. It's because that respect is there that, hey, I'm not going to throw out topics to just confuse you, but when you're talking about, you know, an important topic, there is a lot to cover. And I will point out that both Alex and Trent are making notes about it, right? Like, they are putting down notes to keep track of it, which is perfectly fine. It's just that if Trent understands that if I throw out a lot, he's going to come back with a lot. And that's fine. Like, it's not gish gallop in that sense. I think that's perfectly fine.
Is financially backing this endeavor. And so has some skin in the game on this, of this. And so they're praying, and they're praying a lot in order to see something. I think that's very different. When it comes to persecution, I'll leave on this point. I agree with you. People are willing to take risks for rewards. So Joseph Smith took a lot of risks. And I think, though, from his perspective, there were rewards he was seeking. He became a political leader in Nauvoo. He planned to run for president. He acquired multiple brides, some of them being underage, as young as 14. So we had a television show in the U.S. 20 years ago called To Catch a Predator. And I saw in that show, men were willing to take many.
Okay, I want to see To Catch a Predator White House edition is what I want to see. That's quite frankly what I want to see, because holy crap.
Do we even need Chris Hansen for that?
Probably not. No, probably not. Anyway, but on to his point, I think that he's kind of throwing Mormonism under the bus here. I think he's really just sort of saying, hey, you shouldn't consider Mormonism seriously because of the actions of Joseph Smith and things like that. But we've got to remember that there was a lot of atrocities and horrible things happening in the Bible, especially the Old Testament at the time. So if you're going to take a leader being sort of not virtuous as a slight against a religion, well, there's a lot of leaders in the Bible that were not virtuous. I don't know if I could leverage that against Jesus. I think the worst he did was, go into a temple and kick over money changers' tables and stuff, probably, or smiting trees for some reason. I think, though, that you're sort of running the risk of sort of just vilifying them just to vilify them, because it was earlier, we know a lot more about Mormonism than we do about the early church, right? Like, this has been well documented about the Church of Latter-day Saints, its origins within America and why it got established, but we don't know the motivations of the apostles and Paul and, Peter and things like that. We don't know their motivations. So to say, hey, he got a lot of power and it may be that those apostles got a lot of power as well, right? And it may not have been widespread power, but people have, started cults to simply have people fawn on them, have people believe them, have people follow them. To somebody that is this type of person that needs reassurance, it can be a powerful motivator, especially like with some psychopaths, right? That they will get satisfaction from fooling people, right? They will actually get satisfaction from people believing them when something is not true, right? Convincing people of something that's not true, because they see themselves as having power over that person. They see themselves as being able to influence that person, and therefore they have power, right? So we don't know these people. I'm not saying that, the apostles were a bunch of psychopaths. I'm saying we don't know their motivations, and we don't know what they got out of it. Were they elevated in their society? Probably, right? I mean, I can imagine that if you are the apostle of a burgeoning religion that is sort of being more and more widely supported, that may be a lot more palatable to you. That may be a lot more enticing to you as being like just a potter who lives down the road, right? Like, you could imagine that might be enticing to a certain person, that whether it's true or not, they're getting a lot of praise, worship, power. People are listening to them, validation. It could be very, very important to somebody.
Mhm.
But you're
There's
sort of
quite a lot
assuming
more.
they had no ulterior motives. They weren't getting anything out of it. Weren't they? How do you know that?
It's a weird thing to say, especially when there are, like, first of all, people don't need to have a motive. Like, sometimes they'll just say things or believe things. Like, people can be irrational like that.
Mhm.
But also, there's a potential motive for fucking anything. The most altruistic thing you can think of. Well, people think you're a nice person. Like, there's something you could potentially be gaining out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if the motivation is completely altruistic, and I'll set up this framing for you, right? Because this isn't happening in a vacuum. This isn't happening in like modern society or some society in just a general like Greek city state or something. This is happening in occupied territory. Okay, this is the real important thing, that you have the Romans who have come in and they have basically conquered the Jewish people. Right, like the people that were living there are second-class citizens within their own country. Right, the Romans are absolutely in charge. Okay, that is not up for debate. The person in charge is Pontius Pilate. Right, like he is not, going, oh well, you guys, we will share power and no, he has absolute rule. He can do whatever the hell he wants, and so, if you have a religion starting up that sort of says everybody is equal, that might be a lot more palatable than the previous religion around that sort of says, hey, there's chosen people chosen by God. Right? It may be, it may not be, but the early church had a few things going for it. Like, for instance, poor people liked it because it basically said that poor people were the equal of rich people. That is a very, very radical notion, right? That's a very radical notion for the time, where in Roman and even Jewish society, you had a strict hierarchy of who was more important than who, right? Like Roman citizens were way more important than, plebeian ones. And even in Jewish society or sort of the Israelite society, your family and how it was perceived made you more important than somebody else, right? You had favored families, people descended from these, someone's descended from David or someone descended from the tribe of Levi was more important than other people, kind of thing. So, a religion that sort of came along that says, hey, we're equal, and that, hey, we've they may have been doing it in order to try and consolidate all of the Jewish tribes to resist against the Romans. And maybe it worked because there was a Jewish uprising very soon afterwards. The they lost. They got the brakes beaten out of them by the Romans, but the Romans did have to send a general in to pacify the region. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. Like, there may be other reasons than, oh, well, I want power, that they're doing it. They may have seen it as a way to fight back against the Roman oppression. I don't know that for sure, okay? But I'm just saying, there's more than one reason to start a religion, okay?
Oh, for sure. And a lot of New Testament scholars tend to agree, at least in part, because there's so much in Revelations, if nothing else, about the real Savior will come and drive out the Romans, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Because the Messiah was supposed to come back and save them from the evil. And, you know, we get the feeling that it's supposed to be Babylon, but, you know, would they have said that, hey, the evil that the Messiah will save us from is the Romans? Sure, why not?
He risks for underage girls. So I'm not as surprised that he's going. And then when Smith was arrested and put in the Carthage city.
Oh, that's really important, actually. As Sapphire says, women were big fans. Yes, women were actually given a lot more power in early Christian church than you would suspect, right? They were actually sort of respected as equals in the church, and they were given positions of authority within the church, which was very unusual for the time. And this is the thing: the growth of the Christian religion may not have been something miraculous, as it was just a better idea than what was around at the time, right? It doesn't have to be miraculous. It could just have been a better way to do things. And, you know, women being 51% of the population, you know, it's hardly surprising that would get them a lot of popularity, especially if you're also appealing to poor people, because there's always more poor people than rich people.
Yeah, populism plus early feminism.
Yeah,
that's dangerous. No, no wonder Paul was running around persecuting them.
Yeah, well, I mean, dangerous, but in a way, it would be very, very appealing to the people that do not have power.
I mean, if I were alive at the time, I'd probably sign on, even if I didn't believe, because
right.
If I were me, I would very much resonate with those goals. I'd be like, yes, drive out the Romans, you know?
Yeah, or at least, hey, you know, let's, you know, I deserve to be treated with respect, even though I'm just a lowly mason or something, you know, or I'm a beggar on the street, right? And someone's sort of saying, hey, you're equal in sort of respect-wise to the greatest king. I'd be on board with that as well. I'd be like, hell yeah, I deserve to be treated with respect. I try to do my best, you know, like, okay, I'm on board.
We'd be atheist Christians. We'd be like, I don't know about that Jesus fella, but the movement is more important.
Exactly, yeah. Cultural Christians, as it were.
Yeah.
Jail. He was not like a martyr led to the slaughter. He had a handgun smuggled into the jail, and when a gunfight broke out, he shot back. That's not quite what Jesus and the apostles did. So I grant you, there's going to be similarities in any religious claims.
But we don't know what the apostles did. Okay, that's the thing. Like, but they sort of talk about it as like, oh, the apostles were martyred and refused to recant. Well, we don't know if they were given a chance. And we don't know if they were martyred sort of still saying, hey, I still believe in Jesus. We don't know that. Were they killed for their religious beliefs? We don't know. The church says they were, but that isn't based upon any records or anything. It's just what the early church says. So, you know, I mean, the Bible can't even get whether the death of Judas was a hanging or a explosive diarrhea in the worst possible way. Like, they can't even get that right.
But for me, I think it's very disanalogous. And also for me, when it comes to Mormonism versus Christianity, I would say with Christianity, we don't have really any evidence that says, oh, we've got counterbalancing evidence that this contradicts what we know about the world. Most of our evidence is just, well, can we believe what they said about Jesus? We're not making, that's why, like, I'm not a young earth creationist, for example, because I think it contradicts what we know about the world from science. But the problem is, I think Mormonism makes those kind of claims about ancient Israelites being the progenitors of Native Americans and a lot of other things that contradict what we know about the world. That sets the probability of it being true much lower than we have of Christianity.
Alex,
Well, I mean, yeah, but you know, you're sort of saying, hey, it contradicts what we know about the world. But what we know about the world is that people don't rise from the dead. You know, this isn't something that happens. That once brain death occurs, you're not getting back up, mate. You're not. Like, this is something we know about the world. So I get what he's saying, that, hey, the claims that young earth creationists make are obviously not in alignment with our understanding of how the world has formed, has worked, has been around. Like, I get you. Actually, Gutsick Gibbon did a fantastic video on the age of the earth recently. It was awesome. Highly recommend. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like talking about young earth creationism and where it started. It was actually fascinating. And it was a short one. It was short. It was only a couple of hours kind of thing. So
Yeah.
for Erica, that is short. Just be aware of that. But it was really, really good.
I think it was was it Darwinana, that how science replaced young earth creationism. I know she's done a second one in that vein since then, but I believe that's how we found out the true age of the earth, kind of thing.
Right.
If I recall correct. I could be very confused. It's been a long day, folks.
No, I get you. I get you. It's primordial. She just called it. Yeah. So she did Darwiniana, and then she did Primordial, How We Discovered the Age of the Earth. I've just watched that. She's done another one called Transmutation, How We Discovered Evolution. Really good videos. Highly recommend. So if you do like that kind of stuff, I might link it actually, because I really enjoyed that video. I thought it was excellent. Absolutely excellent. So I'll link Gutsick Gibbon there. But, you know, but also we have to acknowledge that if we're sort of saying that, hey, that belief is in contrast to the natural understanding of the world, which I think that's what he's leveraging. You know, we can't believe that the ancestors of the Native Americans and the Americans came from ancient Levant region in a submarine. I get you. But also we have to acknowledge that people rising from the dead is also something that is against, you know, clinical death maybe. They're just their organs stopping. Yeah, we can restart them. But once brain death occurs, it sort of it really doesn't mesh with our understanding of the natural world. So I think that if you're leveraging that against the Mormons, it can be leveraged against you as well.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that Trent brought up is the idea that Paul was a Pharisee, that the dominant conception of resurrection in the ancient world was a physical one. You know, people were expecting to get their flesh and bones back. So I wondered what you made of that objection.
Yeah, sure. I will answer that. I promise. I must take a moment to respond to what Trent said just then. But I do want to get back to the New Testament. I think that's very important. I don't want to talk about Mormonism all day. But I'm not just going to talk about Mormonism. I'm doing it to draw a comparison. Yeah. So specifically, a few things that Trent said that I pulled out. Firstly, he said that you got to remember that the people that Joseph took out to see the plates were kind of, you know, they were like expectations. They were sort of trying to make them believe it. Trent believes that Jesus predicted his own resurrection. And maybe the disciples didn't fully understand what was happening there. But the idea that this sort of comes out of the blue, I think, is not entirely true. He also said that Martin Harris, one of the first witnesses to the angel and the golden plates, was financially backing the project, and so would have a vested interest. Well, who was financially backing the ministry of Jesus? We're told in the Gospels it was the women. It was Mary Magdalene, who is the first woman to see the risen Jesus.
Yeah, and plus, you know, we've got to take into account that what may not have been for purely religious belief reasons, that the early church promoted sort of an equality of women that the culture and other religions didn't at the time, right?
It's weird that they don't the apologists don't make a bigger deal about that, because that is one thing that did set Christianity apart, that was revolutionary for its time. They want to talk about how they felt basically the same about slavery as every other culture, or how they felt basically the same about science as every other culture. Oh, Christianity made such huge leaps in medicine by giving sick people water, but they don't talk
Yeah.
about the social change because they undid it,
Yeah.
according to at least some of the narratives. So again, a direct narrative link there, I think. Also, the point about Joseph's death, like quite the shootout. I don't think that martyrs need not put up a fight. I mean, it's not like Joseph was being killed, for the sake. It's not like he was being asked to recant or something and he refused and took death for that reason. He was just, of course, he had a message to spread. He was trying to annex Texas to make it a sort of, he was running for president to annex Texas and make it into a Mormon paradise. He's got things to do. So yeah, he shot back. And I've heard.
Yeah, and the reason why he was in jail is because he didn't like what a newspaper was writing about him. So he took a sort of bunch of thugs or militia or army or whatever you want to call it, a military force in, and destroyed the paper and the printing press. And that was a big violation of the societal expectation that you don't attack the press, right? Like, that is a lesson that people could learn today. The press has to be able to report on things.
Trent say before, on the point of the martyrdom of the apostles, to bring it back to the New Testament, we're told sometimes that all of these disciples died for what they believed in. Of course, we have absolutely no evidence that any of them died for their faith, except for James, James the brother of John, that is, that's mentioned in Acts as being beheaded by Herod, although we're not told why. And Trent has said in the past that, okay, we don't know that they died for their belief, historically at least, but we do know, there's a video that you made, Trent, where you said, well, because of the death of their leader, because Jesus was put to death, you know that they must have been living in fear that a similar kind of thing could happen to them. Now, whatever you think about the death of Joseph Smith, you could say the same thing about him. Don't you think his followers might also be a little bit concerned that they're going to suffer under the same kind of violence, especially given how...
That's a really good point. If Joseph Smith, your leader and the person who is most respected, is killed, if you are simply following and you're lying about Moroni and the golden plates or whatever, wouldn't you go, hey, no, I didn't see it. I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, because you know that, hey, he was imprisoned. Even if you're facing imprisonment for it, right? Wouldn't that make you think twice about, like, if you were making up a story about the angel Moroni and golden plates, wouldn't that make you think twice about going, no, I actually saw this thing? So I get that, hey, it doesn't necessarily mean it definitely did happen, but the point is that you're making the same arguments for the apostles and Peter and Paul without knowing what risk they were under, because we don't know how they died, and you don't know what benefit they were getting. So you're trying to do a cost-benefit analysis without knowing either. Just sort of saying, hey, there's no benefit to them. Wasn't there? Do you know that? How do you know that? Like, how do you know what benefit did Paul get by being a respected person in this religion? You don't know. Neither do I. What benefit would all of these people have? Well, we don't know, but you're doing a cost-benefit analysis even while not knowing what the benefit to them is. It's a bit of a problem.
Persecuted they were being by the US government and state governments, and yet the expansion rate of the early Mormon church is the same as the expansion rate of the early Christian community, as Rodney Stark famously pointed out. As for the physicality of Jesus, it's not something I want to die on here, like this I don't want to sort of, there's a joke in there about a hill, but I do think there are a few strange things. Firstly,
you could try to die on it, Alex. We won't be dead forever, my friend. That's how this thing works.
One hopes. Well, when I see you again, it will be interesting to try and high five and see what happens. I think there are a few mysteries in this for me. The first is like, okay, so much of this relies upon Paul, who I think is at best unclear about the physicality of Jesus. I mean, like, Trent has just defended Paul's use of the word spiritual in a way that would, like, spiritual body. He also, just to be clear, you mentioned Philippians, I think it's chapter 3, where Paul says, we will sort of take on a new body just like Christ. And you said Christ's physical body. The text doesn't say that. It says body, but it does not say physical body, just to be absolutely clear, right? I understand that the use of the word body there probably means something corporeal to most readers, but it's not clear. In the same way that Trent hears the word spiritual body and says, well, Paul kind of meant this. When I hear the use of the word body, I can say, well, they kind of mean this. my reading is that I just kind of don't really know about the nature of the resurrected body. That's from Paul, who never actually met the risen Jesus. This is the thing. This is the key thing. Where can we go to find accounts of what the actual risen Jesus was actually like? Well, there are no eyewitness accounts. There are at best, even if you agree with the traditional authorship of the Gospels, then maybe there are two, right? But like, what is the nature of some of the post-resurrection experiences that we're given?
Yeah, we know that one was a copy of another. I think it was Matthew was a copy of Luke, basically, like, or is it that Matthew's a copy of Mark? I can't remember which one, but one's
Matthew's
definitely
an improvement of Mark.
Yeah. So, well, improvement's a bit much. I would sort of contend with that one. It definitely is a more extravagant version. It definitely is more sensational version of Mark. But the whole point is that one's a copy of the other, and one we know wasn't written by one of the authors. Like, we know that one wasn't written. So there's some problems there, and we it's never clear who wrote these Gospels. Right, like the early church says, "Hey, that was Matthew, that was Mark, that was Luke, that was John." In nowhere did these things have an author saying, "Hey, this is Mark, and I'm writing this thing." It didn't have it, right? They're just, the church says that's who wrote them, even though it is anywhere up to 70, 80 years afterwards in some of the later ones.
I mean, firstly, there's just the problem that our earliest gospel doesn't have any at all. And the fact that as the dates get later for the Gospels, the stories get more, and they also get more fanciful, and they also get more theological.
So you're referring to Mark's Gospel there, where there's an allusion to an appearance to Peter in Galilee, but
Yes.
we don't have that appearance narrated.
That's right. I mean, Mark's Gospel, at least the earliest manuscripts of Mark's Gospel, end with the women fleeing, afraid, saying nothing, which is sort of in keeping with Markan themes about cowardice and going away. There's lots to be said about the empty tomb. Maybe we can get into that in the third section or something. But these experiences, I mean, okay, so there's this idea of having a new resurrected body. Got a couple of mysteries. Firstly, Jesus in John's Gospel is still said to have the stigmata. That is the wounds in the hands and the side, right? To the extent that Thomas is allowed to see them, he's invited to see them. We don't know whether he actually touches them or not, so don't take that as
We don't
evidence
know
of
whether
physicality.
Caravaggio was correct.
In fact, he's almost certainly false in my view. It seems to me a better reading that as soon as Thomas is given the opportunity, bear in mind, people forget this, Jesus appears to the 11 and shows them his wounds. And they sort of believe in him. And then Thomas isn't among them. And then Thomas says, "Until I see the wounds." And we sort of lambast Thomas for not having enough faith, even though Jesus showed his wounds to the 11 first. Yeah. But no one has ever said to touch them. But the fact is, he's still got the stigmata. Now, I want to say, if Jesus' resurrected body is essentially the same one that he died on the cross with, why does he retain some of his sort of physical ailments, but not all of them? I mean, for example, Jesus walking on the road to Emmaus in Luke's Gospel. One of the most extraordinary stories in the fact that the two disciples, Cleopas and the other one, don't recognize Jesus. And yet, when he sits down and breaks bread, they suddenly recognize him. Now, there could be some sort of miraculous intervention here, right? But looking at these as historical sources, it seems to me that this is the genre of mythology. I mean, I don't know if Trent believes the road to Emmaus to be a historical story of something that actually happened. It seems to me definitely mythological. That's not to say false or made up. It's just to say it's a particular genre. And certainly, if Jesus still had the wounds from his crucifixion, I think that a man who'd just undergone a brutal crucifixion a few days earlier would be noticeably recognizable as such. But it seems that Jesus' body is glorified. It seems that it's not something like, and yet when you get to John's Gospel, he's still got the wounds of his crucifixion, but I guess like only some of them. Yeah, okay, maybe God decided.
Yeah, so if somebody had got a crown of thorns and all the bloody, like you saw in I don't know if you saw the movie, the Passion of Christ kind of thing, the Mel Gibson movie, like he was a mess, right, in that. And that's sort of how they usually depict it. Like he got stabbed in the side with a spear, he was beaten, bloodied. Seeing a person come along, it's weird that it's just this random person, not, hey, it's this person that has been absolutely worked over. Like he was absolutely a mess, right? Like as you'd expect if someone died being horribly tortured, but they just don't recognize it. So Alex is right here. If he came back in his body and had the wounds of his crucifixion, you would be able to recognize it instantly. It wouldn't be that's a fellow traveler. Oh wait, he's got some crucifixion wounds. You'd be able to see it instantly. So it's kind of strange that Alex is right. It's strange that your crucifixion wounds are selective in what they display. It's just the holes that are there, or the evidence of the holes that are there, but none of the other wounds are there. Like they didn't mention, oh, well, he had all of the crown of thorns cut scars, or the spear wound in his side. It's just the stigmata, which is the wounds in the hands and feet. Seems strange.
Yeah, like similar to what I was wondering about earlier, like if his body was regenerated and he got a different face, like a Doctor Who style regeneration, then why were some of the wounds still there? It's a similar thing, but with a different direction, like why some wounds and not others.
Yeah. Yep. Looks like, he wanted enough evidence, but as I put forward, like, people have survived crucifixions before, and I think it is a reasonable explanation that this was not Jesus, but another person that had survived a crucifixion. Because he wasn't recognized, they didn't know who he was, it was just the wounds that convinced them. Other people, living people, had crucifixion wounds. We know that is the case because historians recorded people that survived crucifixion.
To give him like a new spiritual body, but kept the stigmata as some kind, like I think Augustine and people like this write about how it was kind of like a trophy of his victory and stuff. I don't know, why wouldn't the blood on his head from the crown of thorns be a literal trophy of his victory? Why the stigmata? Maybe because it's a sort of a good narrative point. It's a very sort of striking image that can be used in what is essentially a theological and non-historical story.
And just to clarify there, would you see the gospel resurrection stories as all taking on this mythological character?
I don't know what the intentions of the writers were. I don't know. With the Road to Emmaus, it seems to me almost certain that the intention there is mythological. I'm not sure about John's gospel. Matthew's gospel is a little bit more sparse. I mean, the appearance is a little bit more sort of subdued. But one interesting thing that I want to point out is that, like, so Matthew's gospel says that the 11 disciples go to the mountain in Galilee where Jesus had told them to go. What mountain? When? I think that a key insight into the nature of the resurrection, the resurrected bodies, is the earlier transfiguration of Jesus, where Jesus takes 3 of his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, up a mountain where suddenly his body is transfigured. He's glowing. His robes are said to be whiter than anyone could bleach them. And then suddenly Moses and Elijah appear. And Peter, by the way, Luke's gospel says that these guys are on the edge of sleep. Yes. Which is a little bit odd, right? Like, it's a strange detail to include, as if that kind of matters. Hypnagogic visions are one of the most, by which I mean visions on the edge of sleep, like between sleep and wakefulness, are one of the most common times that people have those kinds of visions. Are when they're...
Yeah, and I mentioned lucid dreaming before, where in lucid dreaming, it seems so real that it's almost indistinguishable from reality. Like, it is almost indistinguishable. Now, something I saw on lucid dreaming was people not realizing whether that they're asleep or it is reality around them. So one of the things that this person said was that you should turn the lights on and off and see if the light levels changes, because apparently our sort of the things that determine the light level are so, like, physical, biological, that if the light level stays the same, then you're dreaming. Right? So it's one way to determine that you're actually dreaming if the light levels don't change, because as a biological function, the light levels will not change in a dream, because that is determined sort of by the thing. But the strange part is that you may believe it's dark and you may believe it's light, but switching a light on and off won't actually change the light levels.
I think that's one of those things that I won't say that doesn't happen for anybody, but it's one of those things, like some people have an internal monologue and some people don't. Some people visualize an apple as a 3-dimensional, fully realized object, and some people visualize a 2D or a cartoon or even just a grayscale shape of an apple. I think this is more somebody identified certain experiences and then tried to generalize to everyone.
Okay. Well, maybe, as I said, that's what I heard, but...
Sure, yeah, some people have said in the past that you can't actually read in your dreams because, according to their study, I don't even know how many people were in the study. It's not important. The point is, they determined that at least one person, when looking at writing in a dream, just saw gibberish, and like sometimes you knew what it was supposed to say, but if you actually tried to read it, it looked like an AI made it. But that's not true for everyone. I know that's not true because I can read in my dreams, you know?
Yeah, okay. No, that's fair. I've heard that one, that you can read in your dreams, but I didn't think that was true.
Yeah, I think it's in the same camp as everybody's brain processes a little differently. I don't know that light levels in it, because I can't remember a specific dream where I've hit a light switch, you know? So I'm like, I'm not entirely sure in my own case, but
Yeah.
I could definitely see a situation where a person experiences that and like tries to jiggle a light switch and nothing apparently happens. But I could also see that that was a unique thing, or not even necessarily a unique thing, but a thing particular to the way their neurology works, and other brains may experience it differently.
Well, it worked for me once. I only remember doing it once, and it was that the light went on and off, but the light level didn't change. That was the weird thing, right? That was the odd thing that made me go, "Oh, I'm in a dream." Like that was like one of
It
the
would be a
things
way to
that.
confirm it, but it kind of makes me think of also of that pinch me and make sure I'm not sleeping, because
Right.
not everyone wakes up when they're pinched, especially if the pinch is in the dream. You know, it's a thing people hear.
Yeah.
And then another thing is this idea of contagious ideas, like the dancing plague, right? Like there was a thing when House MD was on the air, you know, Hugh Laurie playing a doctor version of Sherlock Holmes, where they put a thing in one of the episodes where a younger patient, early teens, something like that, was sitting at a desk and their leg kicked, and House panicked. He's like, they're about to pass out. Like that was, oh, I forget the term for it, but it's like a nerve signal right before you fall asleep as your leg kicks. And immediately after that episode, a whole shit ton more people suddenly started reporting restless leg syndrome, because their legs had never kicked before, and that episode put the idea in their head, and their brain started trying to do that. So I wonder if you heard the thing about the lights not changing in your dream, and that put the idea there so that when you tested it, the brain produced the result that it was expecting.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's possible, but it definitely was a thing. I mean, there was a convincing argument because, you know, what tends to determine light levels for us isn't really mental rather than physical, you know, like physical receptors. So it was a convincing argument. I will say that it definitely was convincing.
I
But
get that, because like when you turn on a light in a dark room, or vice versa, it takes your real eyes a few moments to adjust. If you can just see instantly, or even if you're just watching the light bulb, right? Like it doesn't happen so much with modern lights, but the old incandescents, you could watch them. It was very quick, but you could still see them get brighter as they came up to full brightness. Or after you turn the switch off, they would dim back down to non-lightness.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but food for thought. Try it out sometime if you are lucid dreaming. Try it. Let me know. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you found. Scientifically test it. Yeah, and I'm so glad Probing Time figured out his technical issue. Look, part of my life was figuring out technical issues, and all I can say is the scientific method even applies to if you have a faulty appliance. You observe, question, make a hypothesis. Could it be this? And then you test that by, you know, changing, like could it be the battery? You replace the battery. If it still does the same thing, then you've eliminated that, right? You've scientifically tested it's not the battery. And then go on to, is it the cable? Change the cable. Could it be that? You know, and that's sort of how you narrow it down to what the actual problem is, right? Like it is the scientific method, even though we call it troubleshooting, right? That's what we call it in sort of IT, is troubleshooting. All you do is postulate, could it be this thing based upon your observations, and then you test it and note the result, then go on to the next thing it could be, That's basically what you do. Scientific method, people, it friggin' works. Like, I do notice you didn't pray for it to be fixed. Or at least not that I know anyway. Maybe you did. Maybe it was the prayer. Probing time. Maybe it was the prayer.
It was Buddha
Sort of
being
hard.
merciful.
The Buddha, yeah, obviously from Buddha, because how do you explain all of the electronics being made in China? There you go.
For sleep, implying that maybe something like that was going on here. And they see these figures, and I suppose I want to know what the nature of this appearance is. I know Trent's talked about this before, and he says, well, look, Jesus was physically there and he was transfigured. It wasn't some kind of vision. But what about like Moses and Elijah? Elijah's a bit tricky because Elijah said to ascend into heaven, but Moses, we're told in Deuteronomy 34, is buried in the desert in Moab. So when Moses appeared on the mountain with Jesus, did he sort of climb up out of the grave and walk over and up the mountain physically? And if so, how did they just suddenly appear? It seems to me, in other words, much more visionary. Now, whatever that experience, I think Rudolf Boltzmann thinks that the Transfiguration was originally a post-resurrection narrative that got put earlier in the narrative. Now, why might that have happened? Well, for me, it seems clearly visionary. So maybe that's one reason for not having it as part of these post-resurrection appearances. But also specifically, Jesus says after the Transfiguration to the 3 disciples, not to say anything to anyone about what they've seen until after he's risen from the dead.
Because they're being given a glimpse of the resurrection body, is that?
Well, quite possibly, right? And then they're walking down the mountain, and Mark's Gospel says that they were talking to each other about what it means to rise from the dead. And given the context of what they've just seen, they think, do you think what we just saw, this sort of strange apparition of like Moses, do you think that's kind of the thing that we're talking about? Also, I mean, crucially, I think this is really interesting. John, what's the most embarrassing verse of the New Testament?
It's the verse in the mini apocalypse in Mark.
Well, that's an interesting point. Like if they had just seen it, I mean, I don't think that's that conclusive. Like even if you do see somebody, like you would discuss it, right, and go, what did we actually see? I don't see that as conclusive. But he's right. Like, why is there so much confusion over this, even within the Gospels? It's kind of weird, right? Like, or why does Paul conflict with the apostles' ideas of what being risen from the dead is? It's kind of weird, right? But then again, Paul did not witness any risen Jesus. He saw a light, that's it, and heard a voice. Now, was it Jesus's voice? Well, how would he know? He'd never talked to Jesus when he was alive.
Yeah, it could be Maxwell's demon tricking him with particles, or. But like, did he even see a light? I thought, like his friend saw a light, but he only heard a voice. But maybe
no, other way around.
Struck blind. Yeah.
Yes, his friends heard a voice, but they didn't see anything. They saw nothing.
Okay.
As far as I know. I could be wrong, but that's how I thought it came out.
According to C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis says it's the most embarrassing verse.
This generation will pass away before all of these things take place.
Why is that so embarrassing? Because Mark says, some of you standing here today will not taste death until you see the kingdom and the Son of Man in his glory. What is the very next thing that happens in every single one of the Synoptic Gospels? It's the Transfiguration. It says, 6 or 8 days later, Jesus. So he says, some of you here will not taste death until you see the kingdom and the glory. And then 6 days later, he takes them up a mountain and he transfigures before them. And there's an apparition of Moses and Elijah. And Peter gets confused and wants to build them a tabernacle and all this kind of stuff. And then there's a voice from heaven and a cloud comes and descends. This kind of extraordinary visionary experience, which I think is supposed to mimic the kind of thing that we're seeing in the resurrection. Which is why in Matthew's Gospel, when it says, they went to the mountain where Jesus told them to go, like, what mountain are we talking about? We're never told about this. It seems plausible that it's the same mountain as the Mount of Transfiguration, given that it's in Galilee. And not only that, but when they go up the mountain, which seems like a very specific place to see a physical person, why up the mountain, some of them doubted. Why would they doubt? If I, John, I've known you for years now. If you died and I saw you as I see you now talking to me, as physical as you are, I might sort of go like, oh, I don't know if I can believe, but I would not be able to be convinced that it was you if it were not physically stood in front of me. Yet some of those disciples doubted. Whereas if I had some kind of visionary experience with a few other people and some said, I think that was John come back, I might say, you know what, I'm not sure about that, guys. In other words, I think there's some hints there, but I don't know, that's a lot, and it's not really a point. Maybe Trent can expertly sieve out whatever points I might have made in there and see what he has to say to them.
I love his self-deprecation, I think he is onto a really good thing, though. I think he is onto a really good point, that there are multiple different explanations of what is going on here, and the behavior of the apostles seems incongruent with, even though they say, hey, they believed this till their dying day and they were adamant and stuff, they kind of weren't. Even in the text itself, they kind of, Thomas is doubting, the others are doubting, they're kind of incredulous about it. It's kind of this almost like they don't know what they saw. And I think that's a real important point. And I think that Alex is doing really well to sort of say, well, was it a risen body? Was it a spirit? Was it an apparition? Was it a ghost? Was it a, what did they see? Right, because Trent's already come down on the side of a bodily resurrection, right? Like there was a physical body, but the reactions of the people and different in different gospels aren't that it's a physical body, that it's an apparition, it's a vision kind of thing. So which one is it, is the question. Because if you take it from Paul, it's a body. If you take it from other gospels, it may not be an actual body. So we don't know.
It's like gods. It's in superposition. It's physical, but also, what if it's made of photons? What if he's a hologram? And so it's made of photons, and so it's both a wave and a particle at the same time.
Wow. Okay, that's just nonsense. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
He says, "I am the what did he call himself? The light. I'm the way and the truth and the light."
Yeah,
Maybe
he was a hologram. Okay.
He was confessing.
He was a hologram. Yep. Jesus was hologram confirmed. Okay.
Yeah, Trent, where would you like to take this?
I have a lot, so I think it's always prudent to work backwards from what we just heard, and we'll go back through a lot of the points that Alex raised. So when it comes to the transfiguration, I think that was a physical historical event. And I do think it's interesting that it's Moses and Elijah, because Elijah, the previous narrative in the Old Testament, said he was assumed bodily into heaven. Mm-hmm. But there's also Jewish tradition that Moses's body was taken into heaven. Yeah. Jude chapter 9 refers to the dispute between the archangel Gabriel and the devil over Moses's body. There's extra testamental evidence to a belief that Moses had also been taken up into heaven.
I think Philo talks about it.
Right. So I think that there could be evidence that, I think that holy people can be assumed into heaven. Moses, Elijah. As a Catholic, I think the Blessed Virgin Mary is up there bodily, which also explains these apparitions as well, or these appearances. So I think that's not problematic for me. And especially that Peter says that.
Does having her body in heaven explain her spiritual appearances?
I don't think so.
I'm not saying it can. And also, why aren't Moses and Elijah putting in appearances if having your body in heaven is the key to reverse astral projection or whatever this is?
I don't know. Does Moses and Elias do appearances? I have no idea. I have
not that
no
I've
idea.
Heard.
Well,
and you'd
no.
think we'd have heard, because there's like three major religions that could be seeing those.
And plus, we're pretty sure Moses didn't exist. Like that entire Exodus thing is just a myth. It's sort of so unlikely. And plus, there's been, I think the Gilgamesh was a story about like the parallels between Gilgamesh and Moses are quite incredible. Like a baby that was going to be killed, put in a basket and sent down the river kind of thing. Like we're pretty sure that Moses was just a myth. So, what body did he have?
Maybe it was holograms all along.
And this whole thing, it really does undermine the idea of heaven being this spiritual place where you go to after you're dead. But, you need your body for it. Is other people going to get their body later, or like what's going to happen here? Because it almost sounds like Trent's saying, hey, there's going to be a bodily resurrection, but, everybody's bodies of the people that have died so far are kind of in a cloakroom that they're going to pick up later. They're going to come with their ticket and go, yeah, this is mine. I would recognize that bald head anywhere. Yeah, that's mine. It's kind of weird, right? Very strange.
Want to build you tents. If you just see a vision of somebody in the sky, I find it interesting that if we're just making a grand theological investigation, what's interesting here is I like to compare that to, okay, well, when do we see myth making? What does it look like? When you read like the Gospel of Peter, for example, when people go on an absolute myth making binge, it's really, really over the top. That's from probably mid 2nd century, and you have all the Romans at the tomb, all of the Jews, the angels come down, they come out of the tomb, they're giants, Jesus comes out, he's like 500 feet tall. So that's a lot different than the more sober accounts, especially like what we see in Mark. So it's kind of funny that Mark's a bit more sober. We say, oh, well, he doesn't have all these appearances. Then if he did have a bunch, we'd say, that would just be a bunch of myth making. So I worry if that.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's that, the accounts that are earlier on, like Mark, which is Paul obviously predates any of the Gospels, right? Like, so Paul is sort of the earliest writings we have about Jesus and the resurrection, right? So Mark comes later, but we sort of notice that with Mark, it's a very sort of, not fanciful way of writing about it. It doesn't have these events that sort of the others do, like the angels appearing and things like that. And we've got to remember that in Mark, it kind of just says the women discovered an empty tomb and ran off to tell the apostles, or they ran off and told nobody because they were scared, and that's it, right? That's it. There's nothing after that. There's no, that's all that the empty tomb story has. And then by the time you get to the later ones, like Peter comes way later, right? So when you get to that, it is angels appearing and horns and fanfare and all of this kind of thing. Like, that is the legend building, that it starts out with being a fairly sedentary event, and like in retelling, it becomes more and more fanciful. That is legend building. That's why the mythology is there. I don't understand why this is a point, because if Mark was so fanciful, we wouldn't necessarily say, hey, that was legend. If it was that Mark was all of these angels and stuff appearing and all of this stuff happening, and then Matthew was like, oh, yes, and women found an empty tomb and then ran off because they were scared, we probably wouldn't say, hey, Matthew is the legend kind of thing. Like, we probably would go, yeah, that's weird that it's these supernatural events to start with, and then the later writings have less of that, because that's not what generally happens in storytelling. Okay, it usually starts out with something very sedate and becomes more fanciful, not the other way round. That would be notable, but that's not what we've got. And it's never what, never are writings put down and it becomes more and more mundane as it goes along. That doesn't happen, right? I'm struggling to think of any story which has become less fanciful over retelling. Okay.
It keeps getting smaller and smaller. I mean, there's a literal fisherman's tale in there. He had 2 fish, and then he had 5,000 fish, and it's magic.
Yeah.
It's kind of catch 22 there. I would say Mark is very clear.
Can I ask you, Trent, a clarifying question on that? Because, I mean, do you see apologetic features within the canonical gospel narratives themselves? It's often pointed out, for example, that Matthew and Luke have a new tomb in which no one was laid, or John, a new tomb in which no one was laid. So do you find those same features within the gospels, but it's just in a more sober form?
Yes, but just because there is an apologetic, it doesn't follow that it's a hollow defense or con artistry or trying to defend that which is false. Like Matthew very clearly describes an apologetic polemic that had been going on between Christians and Jews for some time about debating what happened to Jesus's body, with the Jews of his time arguing that the body had been stolen. And then the Christians saying, no, it wasn't, and because there were guards and other things like that, which shows that the apologetic there does show there's a missing body. The Jews just didn't say, oh, he was thrown into a pit, he was devoured by the dogs because of the dog he was. We don't see them making that kind of argument. So there's an apologetic, but it can reveal truths that are helpful to the case.
Well, that's not exactly what happens. What happens is that the Pharisees have a private conversation with the guards that's written about by one of the gospel writers. I can't remember which one. I think it was it Luke that's in, sort of saying, hey, we've let's put around that the body was stolen so people don't believe he rose from the dead. And that raises a number of questions, like how did the disciples of Christ be privy to a private conversation between the Pharisees, who ostensibly were Jesus' enemies, and the guards. Like, it's basically like saying, hey, there was a conspiracy and they said this at Bohemian Grove, but you weren't there. Like, but they had this conversation. It's kind of weird, right?
Mm. The
I'll
Holy
just
Ghost
find the
told me.
verse.
A little
Yeah.
bird told me.
Yeah, so it's kind of odd to have what, for all intents and purposes, is portrayed as a first-person observance of events, but they sort of had this secret meeting that of this conspiracy that's what they said happened. Well, they obviously didn't observe that. It is in Matthew. Okay, so the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, the deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception, the worse than the first. Like, what? What? Yeah, it's almost like, hey, if the body was stolen, here's why you shouldn't believe the body was stolen. Because these people had a conversation and they said that they would tell everybody that the body was stolen. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, the whole thing is just like plugging holes in previous versions of the story.
Yes. Yes.
The fact there is an empty tomb in Mark is to cover for things that Paul never said.
Yeah. Kind of wild, right?
Making. Let me go quick through some of the other things Alex raised, though, about Paul physical body. I would say when Paul uses the Greek word soma, so in Philippians 3:21, I don't recall if I said physical, I said transformed to be like his glorious body. I did say that. The word soma, when Paul uses soma, he always uses it to refer to a physical body, something with corporeal form. So he doesn't use suke or soul or anything like that to describe what we will be. He always uses that more firmer word soma. When it comes to the stigmata, I think I lean towards Augustine there, that I think it's been poetically put that the only man-made thing in heaven will be the wounds of the crucifixion on Christ. And so I think that would really stand to, that this is how Christ triumphed over death and was able to show, yes, it is I, it is not someone else.
That's pretty shitty that you get crucified and everybody gets paradise, but you still are wounded in paradise, like you're still injured in paradise. Like, if the guy died for everybody, wouldn't you at least heal his wounds? Like, is he going to be in pain? I don't know. It's weird. Like, why?
Well, it's the fact some guy said so doesn't mean that's canon necessarily. Trent is just, but also like all the people are made by other people.
That's been my experience. Yes.
It is not some kind of a duplicate. This is, I am the same person, body and soul, who was crucified, who stands before you now.
Which wounds do you think he'll have?
What wounds will he have?
Yeah.
I think that there's the 5 sacred wounds. I've talked about the wounds in the feet, the hands or wrists, and possibly abrasions around the head. But when it comes to speculating what heaven will be like and what my Savior will be like when I meet him, I don't like to speculate too much. I leave that one up to him.
I bet you don't.
When it comes to, though, the physical, so a lot of this, though, it comes to, let's say, okay, you're saying, well, we got Paul, he's got the appearances. How do we know this wasn't just hallucination? That's where I depart from the mental facts people and saying, I think especially like Luke's description of these group appearances, I think Luke is a very reliable source when talking about things. So for example,
well, I mean, do we know that it was written by Luke? That's the thing. Luke's a very reliable source. We don't know, because we don't know who wrote it. We don't know if it was motivated by somebody who had a vested interest in making the church a force in the region, right? We don't know. I'm not saying that it was, but because we can't confirm the authorship, and some scholars think that it was Luke that wrote this, others don't. Others say, hey, it could have been any scholar. We don't know. We have no idea.
Just because something's recorded.
Like, even if it were written by Luke, we don't know who that is. We don't know what that means because this character doesn't appear anywhere else in history.
Right.
Only in one place. It doesn't mean that's, it didn't happen anywhere else. So, for example, in AD 41, the Emperor Claudius expelled a bunch of Jews from the city of Rome. What's interesting is that Josephus and Tacitus don't record this event. It's only recorded in two places. Suetonius, who says they did that because of Chrestus, which might mean they were fighting about Christ, and Luke in Acts 18:2. It's an offhand reference to it when he meets Priscilla and Aquila. Just very.
That's not evidence of the resurrection.
Yeah, the Chrestus thing always gets me because, like, even before I started to, like, talk to actual Bible scholars, I was just like, it looks kind of like Christ, so maybe it is? That's your evidence?
Even if it was, and I mean, Tacitus did record that there are a bunch of people that believed that Christ rose from the dead and worshipped him, but that's not the same as evidence for the resurrection. Right? Any more than me saying, I record that, hey, there's a bunch of people that believe that Buddha is a god that will, reincarnate people. That doesn't mean it's true. It just means that you have recorded that some people believe it. Like, this is the thing. That is really poor evidence because we have, for instance, a recording of, cults of Dionysus that went round, horribly scarring people. That doesn't mean that Dionysus exists, but these people were fervent believers in the cult of Dionysus. That doesn't mean that Dionysus is real. It just means that someone recorded it, that people had a religious belief. It's the most mundane claim ever. And Josephus is basically the same. The only point where they can point to him saying that Jesus rose from the dead was that he said, like in part of his writing, which is almost certainly an addition by an early church later in time, is that he says it was the Messiah. There's a big problem with that Josephus was a devout Jew to the end of his life. He was never a Christian. You got to wonder why a guy who thinks that Jesus is the Messiah would not convert to Christianity. Well, it's because those writings don't fit with any of his other writings. It is not his style. It's obviously been inserted. It is the church trying to make Jesus into the Messiah for Jews.
In fact, we've managed to pin down exactly who did it.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So everybody, all the Christian scholars in the first several centuries had copies of Josephus because they're heretical Jews, basically. So and then Origen or Origen, or however the fuck people pronounce it, Origen of Alexandria. He starts saying, "Hey, look what I found in Josephus. It says that Jesus was the Messiah." And all the other scholars of his age go, "That's not in my copy."
Right.
And so no one mentioned it again for another 400 years. And then somebody, now that time has passed, somebody goes, "Hey, Origen says he found this. It must be there."
Yep. Unbelievable.
Offhand reference. But a lot of times Luke makes these kind of offhand things, and they're 100% historically accurate. Colin Hemer's book, The Book of Acts and the Setting of Hellenistic History, goes through that a lot. So I think I have good evidence in that. Also, Luke, it was a traveling companion of Paul. I think that's very clear. So we get that helps back up, Paul's conversion experience, and that this wasn't just a private vision. People with him saw something, not the whole thing.
But not a bodily Christ, right?
Why? I don't know. He hears a voice. He says, "Who is it that I'm speaking to?" Is "I am Jesus, who you're persecuting." But it seems that Paul compares him, and he says in 1 Corinthians 9, "Have I not seen Jesus our Lord?" He compares his encounter to Jesus in 1 Corinthians 15 to these other appearances that are physical appearances. And when he says this to one untimely born, I think that's a reference to that after Pentecost, after this period. Here's what's interesting, Alex, is like, we don't have a bunch of other Jesus appearances. They stop, basically. So I think Paul is saying that he had an encounter like the apostles, but it was unusually late for him to be given.
Yeah.
Which I think also for me, it shows, this is very interesting, that
if he's saying he had an appearance like the apostles, his appearance definitely wasn't a physically embodied Christ. right? Like, that's definitely not what it was, because he just said he saw a light and heard the voice. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he definitely did not see a man. To Damascus in Bible. Yeah, Acts 9. Okay. I'm just going through at the moment.
Some appropriation. Pentecost has been mentioned at me a couple of times today, and I'm like, why is it called Pentecost? So I just looked that up, and it turns out that's a Jewish holiday about it's 50 days after Easter, which is what the name means literally is 50th, the 50th day after Easter, which to the Jews is Passover.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're just appropriating all the holidays, but everybody knew about that, as Easter was just an appropriation of Passover. But apparently, the original version of Pentecost, before they took on the Greek names and whatnot, was supposedly the day that Moses came down Mount Sinai with the law. So it was the God appeared to Moses and gave him the new commands, and then on Christian Pentecost, the Holy Spirit came down and gave the disciples their new commands.
Right. Well, I just want to point out that I'll just share this, that this is the Damascus Road Saul converted. As he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly a light shone around him from heaven. So we're not even talking a light from one area. It was just a light around him, right? Like, so not a specific light, but it just became bright, basically. He then fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He said, who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Okay, I'll take your word for that. So he, trembling and astonished, says, Lord, what do you want me to do? The Lord said, arise and go into the city, and you'll be told what you must do. And the men who journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no one. Then Saul arose from the ground, his eyes were opened, he saw no one. When his eyes were opened, he saw no one, but they led him through the hand and brought him into Damascus, and he was 3 days without sight and neither ate nor drank. And that's it. Like, he did not see any person even. Right, and this is the point. He didn't even see a person. He just saw a light. Not a light, just light. That's it.
It could even be like heat stroke or something.
Could be.
You had a bunch of hopped up religious believers in the first century. I would have expected the apostles in their letters. It's always funny to see what they complain about, kind of indirectly reveals what's really going on here. I would expect them to say, like, hey, these people claim Jesus spoke to them and said this. No, he only appeared to us. Don't run around with them. Because we even have people today, right, who say that Jesus appeared to them and told them stuff.
Quite.
So it's striking to me that problem is not in the first century church with a bunch of fervent believers. There's an understanding of it being just this kind of historical reality.
This is probably a good place. This is halfway through, so this is probably a good place to leave. But I will point out, why don't you believe someone when they say, hey, I've seen Jesus, and so have these two of my mates. They appeared to me. Because you don't believe them, right? Even though you're a continuist, that you think that miracles still do occur. My question is, well, why not? Like, what does Peter have as extra evidence in this Damascus Road experience that your three mates down the pub don't have? Right, it's the same amount of evidence, and they're saying, "Hey, I saw a light, and Jesus said it was Jesus, and they commanded me to, I don't know, take over the government or whatever the hell you're doing these days." Why isn't that good enough evidence? If Paul writing down that he was struck blind for 3 days and saw someone who claimed, or heard someone that claimed to be Jesus but didn't see anybody and saw a light, and trust me, two of his mates heard the voice too, and I don't know, it just seems strange to me that you're willing to take the word of one but not the other, because we don't know who Saul was, we don't know who Paul was. Not really.
We do know that a pretty goodly part of Paul's letters are not even from Paul. So
Yeah, there is definitely non-Paul Pauline letters. Yes.
yeah. I've always been curious though, and maybe it's just common knowledge to Christians, and I never get, whatever. But like, who was Paul working for when he was persecuting Christians? Like, he's described as a
Presumably-
professional persecutor.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like hand waved away, like that was a common job, like a farmer. You don't have to farmer for anybody.
I believe it was kind of for the Pharisees, like the religious Jewish sort of synagogue kind of thing, their religious establishment that he was persecuting Christians, I believe. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that's the, sort of the idea that I had, that he was working for the Jews kind of thing, the Jewish established religion.
It's interesting. In a period of time when Rome was already grumpy about upheaval in the region, there's one religious sect hunting down and killing another religious sect.
Why is
maybe
that
they
unlikely?
didn't give a shit. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But I do know that the ideas of the persecution in the early church, have kind of been overblown. I think that there definitely was persecution, but not as much as Christians claim there was. Like sort of the Romans, for instance, they didn't really care what people practiced as far as religion was concerned, as long as they just kept paying their taxes. They didn't seem to really care. As long as they obey and pay taxes, they were like, yeah, go worship whatever you want. We don't care.
Yeah, and that's one of the basic rules of running an empire is you don't try to force convert your populace as long as they're paying their taxes.
Right. But I find this interesting because I don't think Trent is actually sort of addressing the problems that Alex O'Connor is putting out there. Because he's sort of putting out, hey, there's this intellectual inconsistency where you'll accept evidence from your own religion, but not from any other religion or any other claim, right? There's this inconsistency between accepting the evidence. And it seems Trent, to me, just goes to another example, like tries to find a reason why that shouldn't apply. So he'll sort of go, oh, but it's got these accounts that, these specters and apparitions and things like that. And Alex points out quite rightly that other religions have that as well, but you don't believe them. And then he'll go to, oh, but, the Bible had all of these people claiming to have seen it. And I have no doubt that Alex can go to, yes, but, and a throng of people saw Muhammad do miracles, and you don't believe that. So it seems to me like it's sort of, Trent isn't dodging, but I think he is just trying to sort of get out of this special pleading by bringing up other examples of why he believes, and it's not really addressing the disconnect between, like, why do you believe that this piece of evidence is really good evidence for Christianity, but not really good evidence for Buddhism or Muslim or Sai Baba or Scientology or whatever. Like, why is it good evidence for you, but when other religions claim it, it's not good evidence? Like, why isn't that on a level playing field? I think that running off to other evidence and sort of saying, well, there was also this thing in the book and also this other thing, and all, that's sort of just not addressing the problem of why you're not giving credence to the same evidence coming from other religions. Like, you're not addressing that.
I don't know. I was hopeful that there might be like some evidence in this evidence instead of, well, but there's miracles today though.
Right. And so when we're looking at evidence, we really have to go, well, is there good evidence? Like, because evidence, if all your bar is some evidence, like that is just ridiculous bar, because there's certainly bad evidence, like circumstantial evidence shouldn't be able to convict somebody for a reason. It's just because, hey, you were in the area at the time and you didn't like the person that was murdered, it has to be you. That is not good evidence, like that is absolutely not good evidence.
Could have been you.
It could have been, but I think we would need more evidence than that. And I think there's a reason for
You
that.
would hope.
You would hope. And I really think that Trent, he isn't giving good evidence. You're basically, the apparition one is really just making me boggle my brain, because he's basically pointing out for his evidence primarily like this sort of cornerstone as something that has not been proven, and is really bad evidence for anything. Like, we don't even have any evidence that this happened. Just because you say group hallucinations are unusual, yeah, but that doesn't mean they don't happen. Especially when you get a bunch of very zealous religious people in an area, they will claim to see all kinds of things. And he acknowledged that he thinks there's fake sightings of apparitions. So, it's kind of like, well, the evidence that you're appealing to is a mystery in and of itself, because we haven't confirmed that's actually a sighting of an apparition. So it's kind of this, I think that Trent thinks that if you can stack up enough bad evidence, it'll just automatically become good evidence. And that's not how we deal with evidence. It's sort of, if it's a ton of bad evidence, it's still bad evidence, right? Like, you can have
transfigured.
Maybe the transfiguration of the good evidence, you pile up a bunch of really crappy explanations, it suddenly becomes overwhelmingly good. No, that's not how it works. That's not how evidence works. You can't just go, oh, we have a ton of circumstantial, but absolutely no other evidence, and that should convict that. But no, that's not how that works. It's still terrible evidence. No. No.
Like, you can have as many apparitions reported in your church mailing list as you want. There's video of Bigfoot. It's not good video. No one believes it. But there's video for Bigfoot, and there isn't video for your apparition. So what are we doing?
What are we doing? And this whole idea that, oh, we've got eyewitnesses. Do you? Because we don't know for sure who wrote the Gospels, so we don't know that eyewitnesses wrote that. Literally, any number of people could have written it. Doesn't have to be. And Paul was not an eyewitness to the resurrection. So, when you take it as, well, do you have enough evidence to present a case? Let's do a case for Christ kind of thing. Did Christ rise from the dead? Like, this would not hold up in a court. That anonymous people said that we saw a resurrected Christ, and a guy who had never met Jesus, never seen Jesus, heard a voice, and he said that 500 people saw it. Like, that is not good evidence at all. You would want the people that actually saw it, and we don't know if they wrote the gospel. We don't know. We don't know.
I wonder if Trent is a fan of Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict.
Haven't heard of that one. I've heard for the case for it. Wasn't that Lee Strobel? And it was like absolutely terrible. I think I read that book and it absolutely was awful. Like, it was the most ridiculous sort of anecdotal, miracles are said to happen. Just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
To think that man used to work for the Chicago Tribune. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, to call it a case, the case for Christ, when there's already this book out, Sean McDowell's dad got famous for writing Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which is why so many apologists say that phrase, why this is evidence that demands a verdict. And it's a recapitulation of many of the same arguments couched in terms of his self-insert autobiography. My wife converted, and so I was going to prove to her Christianity was wrong. And then I got converted.
Yeah.
Because I found out it's really true.
Yeah, if he
So
was a real skeptic, he would realize that he doesn't have to prove that it's not true. The other side has to prove that it actually is true. That's the thing.
yeah,
They're the ones making the claim.
it's awful. I mean, in fairness, he worked for Chicago Tribune like 10 years before I did, so there probably wasn't even the same staff at the time, but like that was disheartening when I found out he used to work there. I'm like, this man used to be a journalist? Like, what are we doing?
Never said he was a good journalist.
Mm. Oof.
Yeah, so yeah, Spilker makes a good point. In a court, it would be immediately dismissed as hearsay. Yes, Paul's writings would be, because he's basically saying that these people said that. It would be hearsay, yes. If we knew that the disciples actually wrote the apostles, then that would be a first case account, which wouldn't be hearsay, but we don't know that they did. Like O'Connor says, like sort of scholarship agrees that at best you've got two of them. At best, and we don't know that for sure. So, you know, what court would put evidence on from a person that you don't know the identity of? That's ridiculous. You know, you always have, because so much of eyewitness or any testimony from somebody relies on credibility, how credible they are. You know, if it is some someone's on trial for murder and it's like the you know, mafia boss testifying on their character, it's not going to mean much. You know, they have no credibility, so we don't know who these people are, not for sure. Yeah, any more thoughts on that? Any other criticisms?
Oh, not specifically relevant. We discussed some of the issues I have with both Trent and Alex in previous episodes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I do like that it's a reasonable discussion. They're being very respectful of one another, and I do like that Trent pointed out his own side are being pretty horrible. You know, like this sort of trend for Christians to just be vile to the opposing side in order to win the debate instead of having an actual discussion. I mean, I had to time out somebody today because they just came into the chat and caps locked and preached and stuff. Why don't you have a conversation about it? Like, why don't you say, hey, this is why I believe it, and sort of have that back and forth, and I can say why I don't. Like, you know, what are you winning by just being obnoxious? I don't know.
Right. Like, I feel like Paul, he did a number on a bunch of different things, but he seriously screwed up Christianity with that guarantee to the Gentiles. You don't have to follow any of the rules. You don't have to pay any attention to what Jesus said to do as long as you pay Jesus lip service. You don't have to do anything, because like Jesus's whole thing was, here I'm modeling for you how to live to get into heaven. Like, you're supposed to be caring and kind and forgiving and try to teach wherever possible and all these other things. And Paul's like, fuck that, be mean, aggressive, stomp on the assholes. I mean, he was a persecutor, so I guess it's typecasting, but like, as long as you praise Jesus's name, you go to paradise. And like
that's not what Jesus said.
That are like, as long as you believe in Jesus, you'll be saved. That's Paulianity. And so they believe they can be as horrible as they want, but they're not doing what Jesus said to do. And it kind of fucked over Christianity. You know, maybe that was his plan all along. He's like, instead of destroying the Christians one by one, what if I pretend to become them and I just ruin their religion? The whole thing.
Plot twist. Yeah, and it's why you get a very different Christian if they read the Red Letter Bible, if they read, you know, if they're sort of a Pauline fanboy, you know, like that you will get a very different attitude from both of them. And I must say, I do like the Red Letter Christians a lot more than the you know, Protestant Pauline fanboys. I got to say. They're at least a lot more reasonable, a lot better in society. I got no problems with them really. I don't think religion's great for you, but I don't think UFC is great for you either. It doesn't mean we should stamp it out. It just means, hey, if you make that choice, okay. But if you're actively doing harm, then yeah, we've got to have a discussion about that. But if your attitude is, well, if you want a discussion about it, I'm just going to be a obnoxious prick, so we don't have to talk. Well, that's a problem in and of itself. Yeah. Anyway, I really did enjoy that. Thank you for joining us, everybody. It's been a wild ride. Fantastic to see you all. If you do want to do me a huge favor, I'd really appreciate it. Do like and subscribe. Share it with your friends if you do want. If people are interested in debate review, especially debate cadaver review, perhaps scrub up. Don't forget, Ember. Be kind to yourself. These debates, there's nothing obligating you to have a conversation with someone that's being an obnoxious jerk. And I would love to see more people like O'Connor and Trent Horn have these conversations. Even if you disagree, you still provide a certain amount of respect to them. I do like that. So I will endeavor to do that. Be kind to each other. Just because someone disagrees with you on whether Jesus rose from the dead or there is a God or something, it doesn't mean that you can't have a working, productive society where people disagree on something. I get that a lot of Christians at the moment are trying to force their religion to be the only one around and basically corner the market, as it were, on worldviews. I get that. But just because that's happening doesn't mean that all Christians are like that, and it doesn't mean we can't live productively with Christians on the other side. So be aware of that. Judge people on their actions, not on their beliefs, I think is the takeaway from that one. But do take care, everybody, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.
To what new horizons can we look now? Where are tomorrow's opportunities? The frontiers of the future are not on any map. But now, what's ahead of us?